Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to live draft coverage of the Fantasy Pros Championship right here on the FFPC social media channels. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and, of course, the Better Sports Network's High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman. Welcoming in, pitch hitting for the KFFSC commish tonight. It's at Aiden LaCorey on Twitter. Aiden, welcome in.
Thank you, sir. I'm again, as always, big shoes to fill when you're pinching for Farrell, but I'll do my best.
If you do your best, we are going to be just fine. It's like that old SNL sketch where it was the Carl Sagan, Tom Hanks Christmas special, or Carl Sagan, Dean Martin Christmas special, where Tom Hanks was Dean Martin and he's holding the cocktail. He's like, "You just show me the camera and the cue cards, and we're going to get through this just fine." That's basically what it's going to be like tonight. We are also going to be joined, by the way, tonight, after the draft is over, Remy LeBeau, who you guys have seen on this program before, the live draft coverage. He's going to join us to give us his take on how his draft went tonight as he is drafting from the 11 spot. Remember, all 12 of these people drafting in this draft that we're covering tonight are going for a $1 million grand prize, and you can too. MyFFPC.com, the Fantasy Pros Championship is where you want to go. And remember, the weekday giveaway is going on right now. So if you draft in one of these leagues, either tonight, tomorrow, or Thursday, you'll be eligible for the weekday giveaway. We're going to have a drawing on Friday. 3 teams that drafted throughout the week this week will get a free entry into this competition. And maybe that free entry will turn into a $1 million grand prize. Don't forget the FFPC main event also has slow drafts going on right now. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that. Another $1 million grand prize. 2 separate grand prizes worth $1 million this year in the FFPC. Dynasty leagues are going strong at MyFFPC.com. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified anytime we go live, which will be again tomorrow. Spoiler alert, more on that coming up at the end of the show today. Let's get to know tonight's drafters, ladies and gentlemen. Drafting from the 1 spot, former guest of the HSFF Hour, Brandon McLean's Frenchie squad is picking there. A little bit of a surprise at the 101. We'll get to that in a second. Sniped is the team name owned by Nicholas Barnes from the 2-hole. Biplab Mandel. You guys know him. He's been drafting a ton here at the FFPC. He's been on a lot of our shows. He's in the 3 spot. Hitting cleanup is Scott Schoenwolf. The Wolf Brothers free donation is drafting 4th tonight. Black Mambas 002. That's Bobby Smith in the 5 spot. Kenneth Ivanowski, the Dark Forest in the 6. Can Bacon, Golden Foot 4, is drafting out of the 7-hole tonight, followed by another guest we've had on these airwaves before, Rich Bilyeu. Facts and Tendencies is his squad tonight. I do believe he's drafting that with his son. Numero Noterts, that's CSC from the 9 spot. Alex Palazzo, Spearmint Rhino, a guy that you see in a lot of the midnight drafts with the Fantasy Pros Championship. He's drafting a little bit early tonight. He's drafting for the 10 spot. Our guest tonight at the end of the program, Remy LeBeau from the 11, and Greg Chamberlain's Danes are drafting at the 12 spot. Okay. Let's get through the first round here. A bit of a surprise right away at the 101 as Brandon McLean goes with Jahmyr Chase, saying no Justin Jefferson, no Travis Kelce. He gets Chase there. Jefferson and Kelce off the board at the 102, the 103 tonight, followed by a couple of running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler, the 2,000-yard man himself. Tyreek Hill is off the board at the 106, followed by Cooper Kupp, a guy who was going very early last year, sometimes the 101 at the 107. CeeDee Lamb creeps up to the 108 tonight. Rich Bilyeu takes him there. Bijan Robinson to CSC. After that is the 3rd running back taken in the first round. Then you're looking at a bunch of receivers to end the first round. Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, and Amon-Ra St. Brown creeping in to the 112 tonight to Greg Chamberlain's Danes. Let's talk about that 101, Aiden. Right away off the bat, a little bit of surprise. People always ask me, well, who's going number 1 this year in fantasy, Bulky? And I say, well, tight end premium format, I've seen Kelce go at the 101. I've seen Justin Jefferson go at the 101 quite a bit. Even Christian McCaffrey. Have not seen a whole lot of Jahmyr Chase, but we see him at the 1 spot tonight. Brandon McLean could have had anybody. He went with Jahmyr Chase.
I mean, you mentioned it. We have seen it. It's not the most common thing. I think specifically looking at these formats, you see obviously Jefferson by far and away, I think the most popular pick. If you look at it, just have ADP data up here. Just looking at it, even the last week, it's the latest Jefferson has dropped is just the 102. So he's going first or second consistently. Chase has a little bit of a wider range. You've seen him fall to 4th. You have seen him get up there to 1st, but it's, as we've all said, less common. Kelce with the tight end premium, as you mentioned, is a very not as popular as Jefferson, but he's up there. I don't mind it. I don't think the gap between Jefferson and Chase is wide if there is any. We've seen obviously the boom weeks that Ja'Marr Chase can have. Borderline can't be topped. He's in an explosive offense. I mean, we saw what he could do. Obviously, he was banged up at times last year, but there's no knock on that pick in any means. I think he's a clear top 1 or 2 guy. So, in surprising in terms of ADP and what we come to expect, but by no means a crazy shocking pick to me.
Not at all. Ja'Marr Chase, 101 in tonight's draft. He goes on average at the 102. So we're picking at nits here. And that ADP data brought to you by Fantasy Mojo, at Fantasy Mojo on Twitter, fantasymojo.com. Darren Armani, the godfather of the FFPC Pros versus Joe's competition, which will launch this Sunday. We are less than a week away from that, right here on all the FFPC social channels, brought to you by, with live coverage with myself. Aiden, I don't know if you're popping on any of those. I know Dave Terpoli is going to be on a few. Farrell Elliott's going to be on the. Yeah, okay, perfect. It's going to be a cavalcade of a cacophony of guests here on the Pros versus Joes. That's coming up on Sunday. So let's look at this a little bit deeper here. Bijan Robinson has been kind of an interesting guy. Now, over the last 3 days in the Fantasy Pros Championship, Bijan Robinson has gone as high as 103. He's gone as late as the 111. He goes tonight at the 109, 108 on average. We've seen a lot of fluctuation with his ADP over the course of really the last 3 months, even prior to him being drafted by the Falcons. And I got to wonder, Aiden, I mean, you saw the live events in Planet Hollywood last year. I think we're going to see some more fluctuation with a player like that. Again, never stepped on the field before in an NFL arena. However, we've seen a lot of success for players, running backs that are drafted as high as he is in their first year. I think we could see some crazy stuff with Bijan Robinson's ADP here over the next month and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before on past live draft coverage. He's my RB1, just personal preference. I'm a big believer. I think it's a perfect scheme fit. I think he's going to be peppered with targets in the passing game, peppered with touches in the run game. Obviously, the Falcons' game script is what I always lean on, and how Arthur Smith, they run the ball when they're down. They run the ball down when they're down multiple scores. They invested the draft capital in on him. I think the only thing that could possibly hold him back is injury. He's one of the most talented running backs to enter the draft. We saw what Saquon did his rookie season. I think it's the most comparable fantasy comparison. So if you're talking about the fluctuation, I'm a guy who would be pushing him up more and more. There was one talk about crazy picks. I think me and Terp were doing a best ball coverage live, and Bijan went 1. Which is it's like, but again, it goes back to this whole philosophy of kind of, if you want to go get your guy, he's not coming back to you. And I wasn't a complete hater on it. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I can see it. So I think I think the hype is only going to build. I mean, if big preseason, those training camp highlights hit, as much as we try not to, it's very easy to be swayed by what we see there. In some ways good, some ways bad. I think there is obviously important takeaways from preseason and training camp, but we've obviously seen throughout time that some of those things are just not true or unproven. But yeah, I think Bijan, I think it's only going to rise. I don't see anything dropping it unless we get reports of like Algier is running with the first team for a good majority of training camp. But I just can't see that happening. So I'm all aboard. I think this is going to continue to rise. He's, as you said, he's been going, I believe, at like the 108. I think you're going to see him get to like that 5-6 range for sure. I don't know if he pushes past that, but top 5 Bijan, I think, is going to be here in late August, September for sure.
I don't think there's any high stakes player out there that would be shocked if he is the number 1 running back this year too. There's definitely higher than a non-zero chance of that. And if you are drafting and you want a Bijan Robinson and you have the 101 in your best ball tournament, well, he's not coming back to you at the 212, so you got to kind of grab him at the 101 if you want him there. We're through 2 rounds here, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, Mark Andrews to Greg Chamberlain as he starts off receiver, tight end. One of 3 teams to go receiver for their start is Remy LeBeau. Devontae Adams is paired up with A.J. Brown for him there. Tony Pollard to Alex Palazzo, followed by Garrett Wilson to CSC. Nick Chubb after that at the 205 tonight, paired with CeeDee Lamb on the Rich Bilyeu backs and tendency squad. The other 2 teams that went wide receiver to start, Golden Foot 4, that's Jalen Waddle going with Cooper Kupp, and then Devontae Smith going with Tyreek Hill. The Dark Forest, Kenneth Ivanowski's team there. A couple of teams go running back. The OGs go with Austin Eckler and Saquon Barkley. That's Black Mamba's number 002. Bobby Smith takes him there. Barkley does. And then Jonathan Taylor falls tonight to the 209. to go with the Wolf Brothers free donation. That's Scott Schoenwolf's team there. Chris Olave, the 210 tonight to Biplab Mandel, and then a couple of running backs to end it here. Breece Hall goes to Nicholas Barnes, and then Derrick Henry off the board to Frenchie. That's Brandon McLean's team at the 212 tonight. The pick I think I want to talk about here, and I just want to make sure I'm not off on his ADP here. Jonathan Taylor normally goes at the 203. He falls a little bit tonight to the 209. This is about a half round of value that Scott Schoenwolf got on him to go with Christian McCaffrey. Darren Armani will have the numbers on this, Aiden, as far as how many teams start off with McCaffrey and Taylor. But it is interesting considering that this is a dude who was 101, 102 in a lot of drafts last year. He falls to the 209. I understand it's a little bit different of a team, obviously a new quarterback there. But, man, a guy like Jonathan Taylor, who his owner says is fully healthy coming into the season, I really like that value there for Scott Schoenwolf. Maybe this won't be a free donation for the Wolf Brothers tonight.
I think in these big national tournaments, it really is interesting if you have a guy falling and you compare him, especially in these early rounds, because there's only going to be so many Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor starts based on where we see their ADP. I'm sure there's some, because McCaffrey at times has fallen to the mid-second. It's not the most, I'm sure it's not the craziest one. There's been some where it's like, oh my God, it's like the only one. I'm sure there is some McCaffrey Taylor, but it's not the most common start to your draft. So from that, I'm intrigued by. The pick in that round, though, that I was actually more focused on was the pick before then. Taylor obviously fell, but I thought Saquon would fall more, because this is our first time doing a live draft coverage since yesterday's franchise tag, tender, contract. I'm not the GM. I'm butchering what exactly it was, but he had until yesterday afternoon to sign the possible contract extension. He didn't. There's all that talks about holding out. I could see it happening. I know people go back and forth. Josh Jacobs still hasn't been picked, so I'm sure we'll talk about him too. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Tony Pollard's in that.
Tony Pollard signed his franchise. There's no talks of holding out. Rehab's
That's true.
Well,
yes,
I like Pollard. Saquon just seems to me as someone who I could see holding out. Just also not in a bad way when I say personality, just kind of his stance coming to the league. Like the articles of him coming to the league, his interviews, he wanted to generally be a face of the league, face of the Giants. Something just tells me I could very well see him trying to, even though I don't know if it works based on past precedent, of taking a stand for the running back position. Because you saw on Twitter just running backs coming out to support other running backs. It was like something out of a movie with them all tweeting about the position. But there's just something to me. I'm just not comfortable suspending a second round pick in a $350 entry, $1 million grand prize national tournament on Saquon Barkley. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on
that. You and I are ironic, or not ironically, but we agree on a lot of stuff. We don't agree on this. Actually, Barkley is the type of guy, and I think Terp, you would know better than Terp. Ask him this tomorrow when you're broadcasting. But for me, like, I think Barkley and Jacobs, these who just went off the board in the third round, I think these guys are values right now because of people worried about them holding out. These guys aren't going to hold out. It doesn't help them, right? It would be very what happened with Le'Veon Bell, all those years ago where he ended up sitting out the whole season. He got paid, but it wasn't until after the season, and he really didn't get that rich of a contract that he was searching for. So I don't think these guys, with that end game in mind, are ready to sit out and waste a productive year out of their lives not playing football. So for me, I'm on board. Like Barkley is, if you get that kind of value on him, you get the kind of value on Josh Jacobs or whoever it is, like that's the kind of chance that you need to be taking to try to win $1 million. There's going to be thousands of teams in this competition, and Barkley to me represents at this point tonight a value. Yes. Do you need to maybe take a shot of Pepto-Bismol with that pick? Maybe. But it's all about trying to be different, trying to get value. When the draft gives you value, just take it. It's like Moneyball. Brad Pitt as Billy Beane. It's like if the other team's going to bunt, just give you an out. Take the ball and throw them out. Don't think about it. Tell them thank you. Just do it. When value falls to you in the draft, take advantage of it. I like the Barkley pick there. I understand what you're saying too, and maybe it's not for the weak of heart. But I like to be bold in these contests, and I think that's what we saw Black Mama's 002 Bobby Smith did with Barkley. Let's get through the third round here. because there's a couple of picks I want to talk about. Najee Harris to Brandon McClain, Jahmyr Gibbs at the 302 to Nicholas Barnes, who's hanging out in the YouTube chat. What's up, Nicholas? Patrick Mahomes, first quarterback off the board tonight to Biplab Mandel, a rainbow start for him. Tight end, wide receiver, and quarterback. T. Higgins off the board at the 304, first receiver drafted by Scott Schoenwell. Back-to-back quarterbacks here. Jalen Hurts to Bobby Smith here at the 305, and then Josh Allen to Kevin Ivanowski. TJ Hawkinson is the third tight end off the board to Golden Foot 4, followed by DK Metcalf to Rich Bellew. Ramondre Stevenson joins Bijan Robinson in the CSC backfield. Off the board at the 309 tonight. 310 is Amari Cooper, followed by a pair of running backs, Travis Etienne and Josh Jacobs. Etienne at the 311, and then Josh Jacobs at the 312. We talked about Bijan Robinson getting steamed up and a guy that could go even higher than he is right now, Aiden. What about the pick of Jahmyr Gibbs at the 302 to Nicholas Barnes tonight? You look at everything that is being said about Gibbs, and he's used around the formation, and he's catching all these passes. They're very, very excited about comparing him to some really great running backs. This is another guy that I don't think the ascension's complete on Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's going to continue rising. He was running back 11 tonight. Man, running back 6, running back 7 isn't out of the question when we get to Planet Hollywood in September.
And as we just talked about, let's say that regardless of if you and me disagree, if Jacobs and Saquon have a prolonged holdout through training camp, Gibbs is going to surpass their ADPs, right? He's going to go before them. Breece Hall, maybe there's some injury concerns. Who knows the ACL recovery, although it seems like it's going by well. You never know. But yes, in short summary, yes, I agree with you. The ascension's not here. Thursday night, they play Kansas City. If he has a big game, it's going to
101, baby. We've seen it happen. We saw it happen a few years ago. Nobody was talking about Kareem Hunt, and then he fumbles on his very first carry on Thursday night at the viewing party. You got hundreds of FFPC players in there, and it was just a collective, oh. And then he goes on to have a massive night, and like the Podfather, Matt Kelly, we had Manzanelli was there as well, the alter ego for Peter Overzet. And they were, I remember the video, they're like, we can't believe that Kareem Hunt's going 101 in all these drafts. It could happen again with Gibbs this year.
I remember that year I was in on Kareem Hunt before Spencer Ware, which is a name from last one pass, got hurt. And I remember thinking, granted, back then I was just young. I was just out of high school. So for me, it's just it was just like my home leagues. I was just like, oh my God, his ADP is going to skyrocket even there, because it was a couple weeks before the start of the season that Ware goes down. And then and then I got him. I reached maybe the second round or something, because I was all in. But yeah, the Kareem Hunt is a comp in terms of what Gibbs his ADP could look like. And I'm sure some people would be very happy if Gibbs starts off slow, maybe that Thursday night, kind of just has a middling game, and the people who are going to be jumping on his ADP, let's say David Montgomery just dominates touches, the people who are going to be jumping on Gibbs in the late 4th, maybe even 5th, with people concerned about that game script, there's going to be a lot of people in the high stakes community who would much rather that outcome and suffer a poor Gibbs week 1 performance and reap the benefits of a deflated ADP. But all the reports in training camp are that, as you said, is that he's being used all over the formation. I mean, just look at his tape at Alabama beyond anything. The eye test doesn't lie to you, and the 12th overall pick, that draft capital, does not lie to you. They picked him to use him and use him a lot.
You know, and we just saw Cam Akers go off the board. I remember it was a double-edged sword, because it was last year he fell like a stone after the Thursday night game because of the usage of Darrell Henderson, who obviously went way up, and now that didn't work out over the course of the season. But
last year the Rams had a ton, because besides Kupp, I was big on him. It's just still kicking myself. The Allen Robinson dropped like a stone. He went from some of those. That's what's really cool about being in Vegas every year, as I'm sure you can test, is you see it on the online draft boards too, but really being there and you almost see a physical fall of a player. Like Allen Robinson was going late 3rd in some of those drafts last year, and then did nothing, and then you're seeing 7th round, 8th round. So it goes both ways, and then there's some players that Josh Allen got moved up. Diggs went a lot after their big performances. So for sure it can go both ways, but some players it's probably a positive, although I can't think of one last year who really maybe netted a true like value because of a rough opening week game, but it can happen.
It can happen for sure. Let's go to the YouTube chatter right now. Mac Nova, wants to point out the final pick of the third round tonight, Josh Jacobs, running back 14 at the 312. This is kind of what we were talking about a little bit with the potential holdout. Running back 10 at the 304 is where he normally goes. And then tonight, big time value. I love the pick here by Greg Chamberlain with the 12 spot, especially when you consider he already has his number one receiver and his number one tight end. He gets Josh Jacobs there. Now, are you as bearish on Josh Jacobs given the situation as you are about Saquon Barkley?
I think Jacobs, I am not as bearish on, and there's a couple of reasons. Some of it is also just the narratives. I think Saquon, there seems like more genuine animosity towards the Giants and issues with those negotiations, which again, coupled with things he said in the past, make me think that taking a stand, even if it's, as we said, history has proven it's not worth it. Well, the flip side is Josh Jacobs. He's waiting outside the facility, which is really depressing. He wanted that contract to get signed. He was literally waiting outside the facility with Max Crosby.
Max Crosby. Yeah, that's right.
Hoping it would be signed. But there's just something that at least you would assume then that the dialogue was better, even though they didn't reach a deal. I think Jacobs, I know he was the rushing leader, but last year was his first real breakout year. He's had some okay years statistically, but in the years prior struggled at times. I just think there's, again, but this is just me sitting beside my computer with no inside information. Just based on what I've read and reading the tea leaves, I would think Jacobs is more likely. I think he'll be there week one. I think he kind of has to. Well, Saquon, I really do think he could be the one holding out.
And the other thing, too, you got to consider draft capital. I mean, Jacobs was going at the end of the third round. Barkley was in the mid-second. There is a significant difference there as well. Let's get through the fourth round. Lamar Jackson is the stack complete for Greg Chamberlain. He gets Andrews in the second. He gets Lamar Jackson in the fourth. George Kittle to Remy LeBeau, followed by Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, and Jerry Jeudy. Fourth round receivers going to Balazzo, CSC, and then Rich Bilyeu here right in a row. 3 wide receivers in a row, then 3 running backs. Joe Mixon is the first running back drafted by Can Bacon there. Then you're looking at J.K. Dobbins to Kenneth Ivanowski. Aaron Jones, instead of going with a tight end or a receiver there, Black Mamba's 002 gets their third running back, and Aaron Jones like that pick. Deebo Samuel and Christian Watson after that. Hey, 2 Packers in the fourth round. You got to love that. Kenneth Walker at the 411, followed by Kyle Pitts, the final pick of the fourth round. Feel like I always come back to this, Aiden, but Kyle Pitts literally in the FFPC, every single year he's been in the NFL, he has been a polarizing player. He continues to be a polarizing player this year. Tight end 5 at the end of the fourth round. Is that the spot where you want to be in business with Kyle Pitts in a tight end premium format like Brandon McClain is?
Weird player, right, Bulky? Just weird, because you have that rookie year, and I don't think a single person would have predicted the drop-off that he had from year 1 to year 2. And I don't think it's him as a player. I really do think it is coaching, game script, how often he was targeted. There's also something to be said of just the fact that, I mean, so many of his passes that were thrown his way were uncatchable with Mariota. I'm not a Ritter guy. Again, the same reasons I love Bijan was why I don't like Pitts. But as you said, late fourth round, tight end premium. We know the talent that Kyle Pitts is. I think you say go big. I think he's worth the risk.
Yeah.
I think Goddard and Waller's a risk as well with the injury concerns, but Goddard and Waller, you would argue, have higher floors, but I think the ceiling could also be lower for them. I think Pitts is in the right range. Those 3 guys are kind of consistently always shuffled around, but I do go back to what you said. Normally, I do agree with you, is to kind of take the swings on these big tournaments. I think Pitts late fourth, and you just hope that the rookie year Kyle Pitts, those kind of sets are kind of what we get, with hopefully more touchdowns versus last year's just abomination of the season.
I look at the upside that Brandon McClain is acquiring at the 1 spot. Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts, Justin Fields. These are all guys that could realistically be tight end or, top 2 at their position this year. And then you get a depressed Derrick Henry and a depressed Najee Harris. There's a lot of upside for Brandon McClain to be working with there. Let's get through the 5th round here. 501, as I just mentioned, Justin Fields to Frenchie. That's Brandon McClain's squad. Drake London is the 502 tonight to Nicholas Barnes. That is his second receiver drafted there. Cam Akers, first running back off the board for Biplab Mandel, followed by Dallas Goedert. 6th tight end drafted tonight. The first one for Scott Schoenwolf. DJ Moore, Justin Fields' top target in Chicago, goes off the board to Bobby Smith there at the 505, followed by Deontay Johnson at 506. Darren Waller, First team to double up on tight ends is indeed Golden Foot 4. Can Bacon pairs Darren Waller with TJ Hawkinson. Well, they're running the 12 personnel there. Darren Waller, tight end 7 tonight at the 507, second tight end drafted by Golden Foot 4. Joe Burrow, DeAndre Hopkins, and Justin Herbert to Bill U, CSC, and Balazzo after that. And then we wrap up the 5th round with Christian Kirk and Chris Godwin. Can I talk about Christian Kirk yet? Yes, I can. Where do you stand, Aiden, on Ridley v. Kirk? Ridley went off the board tonight to CSC at the 404. Kirk went off the board tonight, wide receiver 26. Ridley was wide receiver 18. Christian Kirk goes off the board at the 511. Now, as I look at the ADP between these top 2 Jaguars receivers, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver 17 at the 403. Christian Kirk is off the board, wide receiver 28 at the 602. Was he overdrafted tonight here at the end? Probably not overdrafted at the end of the 5th. But your thoughts on the disparity between those 2 Jaguars receivers this year? For me, I'd rather have Kirk, man. I don't know what to expect from Ridley this year. Kirk, to me, a guy who had a really good season last year. I think he puts up another good season this year.
Kirk had a great season last year. I'm in on both of them because I'm just in on that offense. I think Ridley's a more talented receiver, and I do think that normally wins out and stuff like this. So I'm in on Ridley. I think the ADP, we've talked about it because you've talked about an ADP that skyrocketed over the past couple of months in all formats. He went here at the 404, Calvin Ridley, wide receiver team, which is right about where he is going. I've seen him, though, late 3rd round. I've seen him or mid 3rd round. There was one draft I saw him in the 2nd. Like, his ADP is all over the place. It's crazy. Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley, I think, should be closer than they are. As you said, it's about roughly a 2-round difference on the ADP over the last 3 days. But give me Ridley over Kirk. But when you have that 2-round difference, I think Kirk, there's going to be just even less attention off of him with Ridley opposite him. So, and I just think that offense is going to keep ascending. So I'm in on Kirk with you. I'm not out on Ridley by any means. I think that ADP should be closer together. I don't think there should be a 2-round disparity.
Speaking of that Jaguars offense, Trevor Lawrence was the 2nd pick drafted in the 6th round tonight by Remy LeBeau. Brandon Ayuk went off the board right before him. And then following Lawrence, Alexander Mattison, the 603 to Spearmint Rhinos. That's his 2nd running back drafted. CSC now has 4 receivers: Wilson, Ridley, Hopkins, and now Terry McLaurin at the 604. Rashad White joining Nick Chubb in Rich Bill U's backfield. A lot of receivers here in the mid-6th. Mike Williams to Golden Foot 4. Jahan Dotson off the board to Ivanowski. And then Treylon Burks, the new teammate of DeAndre Hopkins, to Black Mamba's 002. That is Bobby Smith. Marquise Brown, the 3rd receiver drafted by Scott Schoenwolf, followed by Miles Sanders joining Cam Akers in the backfield for Biplab Mandel, and then a couple of receivers to end the 6th round. Tyler Lockett to Sniped, and then Kadarius Toney to Brandon McClain as his number 2 receiver to go with one Jamar Chase. In this round, Treylon Burks went off the board, Aiden, as the 32nd receiver. Now, this is the first time, at least I've streamed a live draft, since DeAndre Hopkins signed with the Titans. Hopkins tonight goes off the board at the 509, wide receiver 25. There's not a lot of room between Hopkins and Burks. I'm actually surprised that they were drafted so close together. Am I wrong in that?
Yeah, looking at the ADP, I think Hopkins is going to start to sink. He was going, I'm sure it factors in about a day or 2 after he signed, but he was going at the late 4th, the 411. I just don't trust that offense. I think Tannehill's clearly descending. I just don't think they have a lot of weapons. I'm not a fan of the play calling. I do think it's as long as Derrick Henry's there. I know there's kind of, depending on how they start, there could be a bunch of trade rumors about him. You should call Terp to discuss this because this was our frequent co-host. This is Treylon Burks is his guy. I don't know if I was a fan of the offense and I was really worried about the issues that the style they have could present in the quarterback play, especially if they go with Levis. And the Kentucky guy, kind of have to stand for Levis, but I think it's going to be some pains early. Hopkins is only going to take away from Burks' target share. I know there was a question in the chat about Chigakonkwo. Yeah, just bad news all around. DeAndre Hopkins, do what he wants, get his money, respect that. Based on everything that he said he wanted, was just went 0 for 3 on his big 3 checklist. Rough landing spot for fantasy for pretty much everyone involved, I'd say, except maybe maybe Derrick Henry, and if Ryan Tannehill has any life, that could be a boost. But yeah, I'm not surprised they're going close together. I don't like either of them.
I'm going to make looking into my bulky crystal ball here, Aiden.
Mm-hmm.
I think the disparity is going to grow quite a bit between Hopkins and Burks. I think part of the reason that people were so excited about Treylon Burks was the perceived target volume that he was going to receive this year. He ain't getting that anymore. It is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. We'll get to Okonkwo in a little bit. But I think Hopkins is good. Hopkins, he could go anywhere, and he's going to be a target monster. And I don't care. Sometimes I prefer – this goes back to what I learned from the Dizzle 10 years ago or whatever. Sometimes I prefer these quarterbacks that kind of stink or suck to be throwing to these receivers, because a lot of times they're only good enough to make one read. Jake Delhomme was only good enough to make one read, and it was usually Steve Smith back in the day, and that's what made him so great. And I think that could happen again with Tannehill and Hopkins this year. Now, Tannehill's more talented than Jake Delhomme for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Hopkins has this massive, huge target season where he's threatening 100 receptions or whatever, where you can get him in the fifth round fifth round tonight. And Burks is just kind of left on the sideline. I don't like him at all. And this brings up Cobra Kai is back in the YouTube chat right now. He said he thinks Lockett should have went over Burks here. The offense will be fine. They have a real wide receiver 1, real wide receiver 2. Last year they had nothing. And I'm telling you, with Lockett, I would totally be taking him over Burks. Lockett every single year, it always, I drafted him in the Scott Fish Bowl actually, so maybe I'm kind of biased here. But every single year, people see, I know Dan Williamson from the GOAT District is a big Tyler Lockett fan. People just they forget about him and they don't respect him. And he falls in drafts, and then he ends up having these big weeks for you. I think the presence of DK Metcalf had a lot to do with that, and it still has a lot to do with it. But yeah, man, give me Lockett over Burks. I like that. I like the Lockett pick for Nicholas Barnes here as his number 3 receiver. Already had 3 running backs off the board. We'll get to his tight end that he took in the 7th round. I'm team Lockett over team Burks this year.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we have to consider is obviously, again, the ADP is still adjusting, so I wouldn't call it solidified, but Burks' ADP the last couple of days is 707. So this 6 to 8 was a reach by almost a round, just looking at the ADP, regardless of where he went, Hopkins. So we'd be talking about, and obviously if Hopkins is signed, some people go, oh, I love the upside, the target share, as you said, but this was a reach relative to ADP, regardless of situation, as 707 is what Burks normally goes at. As, let me get it up here, I just set it up, as wide receiver 36. It was his wide receiver 32 today, but almost a round early. So it's certainly a reach by pretty much all metrics. Yeah, Lockett, he's never been the sexiest fantasy player, but he gets it done, right? And sometimes you overlook that for the flash, the possible booming upside, but his floor has stayed the same, and it's a consistent wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 output for you every week.
He's a great best ball pick, but at the same time, I think he's great for managed leagues like the Fantasy Pros Championship, where you can win $1 million when you sign up, myffpc.com. Remember, if you think you can beat these 12 competitors tonight, sign up, myffpc.com. Get entered in the weekday giveaway for free. It doesn't cost anything to enter the weekday giveaway. Once you're in the Fantasy Pros Championship, you are in the weekday giveaway through tomorrow night, through Thursday night, beg your pardon. Let's get through the 7th round here. Isaiah Pacheco off the board to Brandon McClain at the 701. That's the 3rd running back he's taken. Sniped, got his number 1 tight end. Nicholas Barnes takes Evan Engram there, followed by Damian Pierce, the Biplab Mandel. Big receiver run here. It's weird. These four teams here went receiver in the 6th round. They all go receiver here again in the 7th round. Scott Schoenwolf gets Mike Evans at the 704. Jackson Smith-Njigba, the 3rd Seahawks receiver drafted tonight, wide receiver 37 at the 705 to Bobby Smith. Gabe Davis and Michael Pittman to Kenneth Ivanowski and Cam Bacon, respectively. Pat Freiermuth will be the tight end of choice for Rich Bilyeu tonight at the 708. Then you're looking at DeAndre Swift joining Bijan Robinson and Ramondre Stevenson in the backfield for CSC. That is a lot of running back targets there. Quentin Johnston joins Keenan Allen, his real-life teammate, on Team Spearmint Rhinos. That's Alexander Balazzo here at the 7-10 tonight. James Conner and David Montgomery round up the 7th round. Conner, the 2nd running back for Remy LeBeau. David Montgomery, the 2nd running back drafted by Greg Chamberlain here to go with Josh Jacobs to round out the 7th round. Let's you talked about the Jaguars offense, Aiden, and really being a fan of them this year, be it Ridley, be it Lawrence, be it Christian Kirk. Are you also in on Evan Engram when you look at him tonight at the 702, 8th tight end off the board? I don't think tight end 8, normally at 707. It's about a half round's reach, but I think given the way that Nicholas Barnes was forming his team, it makes a lot of sense for Ingram there.
Again, it's and then in on the offense, in on Evan Ingram, signed the contract extension. They want him there. He said this was always been a talented player, couldn't put together New York. All his interviews he's had is that he kind of rediscovered his love for football. Great year last year. Obviously, Ridley will probably take away from some of that, but again, in kind of I wouldn't call it necessarily a weaker tight end field because I think there's a lot of guys with upside, but it's a little more sometimes dart throws. I think Ingram is a nice fallback option. Kind of that's like the end of my tier after Pitts, Goddard, Waller. We talked about even Kittle. Someone's going in their range, but then there's kind of Ingram, and then it kind of gets to the guys. I'm like, I just don't know. I feel comfortable having Ingram as my tight end one and feeling good about starting him each week.
I want to get through the rest of the 7th round as far as the picks I liked here and maybe didn't like. What do you make of, and this is more of a commentary on the way the Fantasy Pros Championship drafts have been going off this year. We have 3 Seahawks wide receivers off the board tonight, halfway through the 7th round, technically before halfway through the 7th round. Is that a mistake? Can all 3 of these Seahawks receivers return value? Metcalf was drafted tonight as the number 2 receiver for Rich Bilyeu. Tyler Lockett was drafted as the number 3 receiver for Nicholas Barnes. Jackson Smith and Jigba is the 3rd wide receiver drafted by Bobby Smith. All 3 of these guys are going to come through this year? Because if so, Geno Smith should be going a lot higher in drafts.
And to be honest, more than likely, if you're playing the odds, not all 3 will return their value. Mm-hmm. But I think you're banking on never know with injuries or one gets phased out. I love Lockett, as you said, too, as just kind of this. He's unsexy for sure, but he kind of delivers, but is getting up there in age. At some point, the floor is going to drop out, right? The age is going to catch up to him. We just see it. I don't know if all of them return value, but I think you're just taking a shot that these 2 of the 3 should, and I think there is a chance that all 3 do. I agree with you. I've been saying it about Goff, but Geno, I think it applies to as well. I think Goff, with all this discussion about how much we love this offense, we love their weapons, I always think that Goff should be going a little bit higher than he does with this potential high-powered offense, especially with some of their dome games that they had, which on one of our last live draft coverage with Bradley Stalder, he brought up, and how in the fantasy playoffs, Jared Goff has multiple dome games, and Jared Goff explodes when he plays in the dome. Geno Smith, I think that's honestly the point I take away from him more is, hey, if we're buying all these Seahawks receivers, which people are, Geno Smith should probably be going a bit higher.
The 8th round is complete. I wanted to talk about CSC's running backs before we got to the 8th round, but he added another running back in the 8th round. So we'll get to him in a second. Elijah Moore is the 4th receiver drafted by Greg Chamberlain at the 801 tonight. Javonte Williams comes off the board at the 802. He joins Connor and Etienne and Remy LeBeau's backfield. George Pickett's the 5th receiver drafted by Alexander Bledsoe, followed by Dalvin Cook to CSC, which I just talked about. Sky Moore from the Chiefs is now a member of Facts and Tendencies. Rich Bilyeu takes him as his number 4 receiver here. Big running back run. So this is kind of weird when you're looking at sort of the middle of this draft right here, teams 4 through 7. They all went receiver in the 6th and 7th round. They all went running back here in the 8th. Zach Charbonnet to Ken Bacon. Then you're looking at Rashad Penny to Kenneth Ivanowski. James Cook to Bobby Smith. And then Antonio Gibson to Scott Schoenwald. Jordan Addison joining a very young receiver core for Biplab Mandel. Probably looking for some explosion there. We'll get to that in a second. Alvin Kamara, the 4th running back drafted by Nicholas Barnes, and his real-life teammate Michael Thomas at the 812 to round out the 8th round tonight to Brandon McClain. Let's talk about CSC's running backs. Bijan Robinson in the 1st round, Ramondre Stevenson in the 3rd, DeAndre Swift in the 7th, Dalvin Cook in the 8th. This is sort of like a PPR running back dream here, where you look at all those potential targets there. Now CSC does not have a tight end nor a quarterback yet, but man, I look at everything those running backs can do, and then you pair it with those receivers. Garrett Wilson, who could be a top 5 receiver this year. Calvin Ridley, I know we talked about earlier. DeAndre Hopkins, who I think is going to have a massive season, and Terry McLaurin as a bounce back candidate this year as your number 4 receiver. Boy, I really like CSC's team. Well, it'll be interesting to see how he fills in the tight end crack here, but I think, oh God, mark the tape on that one. Should not have said that. Dalvin Cook off the board in the 8th round here, CSC. What do you make of his running backs? I really love him here, Aiden.
It's always worse when you bring attention to it, Balky. If you just kept going.
I know. It happened on my terrestrial radio show today, and I was like, just move on. Don't say anything. And it's just like, oh, I got to say something at this point. It was so obvious. But you're right.
The new age fantasy players are not going to like this running back discussion, but hell of a job right here. As I've already expressed my love for Bijan. Ramondre, I'm a mid-second round believer, and I look what he did last year. I know there's the Patriots running back stigma, but I'm all in with now a real offensive coordinator. They didn't add anything in the passing game. I think he's still going to get a ton of dump downs. That's great value. Dalvin Cook's ADP is 606. Now he's gone late like this before, but again, you're almost getting about 2 rounds of value on Dalvin Cook, which is pretty shocking. Dalvin Cook, I'm a believer that the underlying metrics and signs are that he's on the decline. I do believe that, but still in the 8th round, you're getting more than likely a guy who's going to come in and be an RB1, and you hope that he is trying to hunt out and join an explosive offense. So again, 8th round, no qualms for me. That's a great pick, just value-wise. And then Swift, I am a believer in that the Eagles are going to be able to finally utilize his talent that the Lions were shockingly never able to. I'm sure there's something there with Swift, not to be rude to him, but there's something there that he wasn't getting the usage because it just doesn't make sense. Their personality, work ethic, something, right? That's all I can think of. I know he dealt with injuries, but yeah, DeAndre Swift, these running backs are fantastic. And I think you could see a conceivable chance that all 4 hit and are RB1, RB2 starting level running backs all year. Like there's that is more than a legitimate outcome. So I think that's massive to have.
It's so weird. I'm already like chalking up Dalvin Cook to the Dolphins.
Everyone is, yeah.
But like he's not there yet, and we know there's a non-zero chance he returns to Minnesota, which I know a lot of people don't want to see. Obviously, the people who are investing in Alexander Mattison early, which there's kind of been some blowback on that as far as investing in Madison because of the talent level of Dwayne McBride and Ty Chandler behind him as well. That's a story for another day. Let's get you through the 9th round here. Brian Robinson at the 901 to Brandon McClain as his number 4 running back. Jamison Williams off the board as the number 4 receiver drafted by Nicholas Barnes. David Njoku is now the 2nd tight end drafted by Biplab Mandel. He pairs Travis Kelce with David Njoku as his 2 tight ends. Deshaun Watson at the 904 tonight to Scott Schoenwald. Brandon Cooks, the 4th receiver drafted in the last 5 rounds to Bobby Smith. You're looking at Dalton Kincaid starting at tight end for Kenneth Ivanowski's team. Zay Flowers, the rookie receiver for Baltimore, will be the number 5 receiver for Cam Bacon there at the 907. Samaje Perine, the number 3 running back drafted by Rich Bilyeu. Then you're looking at Cortland Sutton, 5th receiver drafted by CSC. Still no tight ends and quarterbacks on that team. A.J. Dillon backing up Alexander Mattison and Tony Pollard for Alex Balazzo. His real-life teammate Romeo Dobbs going off the board to Remy LeBeau at the 911. And then Tyler Higbee joining Mark Andrews on Greg Chamberlain's Danes team at the 912. Aiden, we now have 3 teams who have at least 2 tight ends. We have 3 teams without any tight ends. Is it panic mode for those teams yet, given that we already have 12 tight ends off the board in this tight end premium format?
I mean, I think you're panicking a little, but I kind of go back to something I kind of said earlier, where the tight end class, again, you might not have a lot of the elite options, but there's a lot of intriguing dart throws, and maybe even better than dart throws. I feel it's a little bit too harsh. There's a lot of guys in that 10 to 20 range that people there. I've seen every single one. I've seen multiple people are super high on. There's just a lot of uncertainty within the position, but there's also a lot of people with good opportunities. But when you have some of these teams are doubling up and you're not, I think there is starting to become a risk. You just have to be. This goes back to some of these people are very confident in some of these people late. The Jawan Johnsons. I've seen Bradley Stalder again, just because it's his some of his talking points were in mind. Hunter Henry, I think, is going like in the tight end 20s. He has it ranked as his like tight end 11. So there's he goes back, and he again go look at our best ball tournament coverage with Bradley Stalder. It was genuinely fantastic. He presented so many great stats behind it and his thought process. But again, like as we now we can talk about him, Chigakonkwo goes, but they're just guys who I think some of these are going to hit. You always hear about every year there's a tight end who's drafted outside of the top 20 who finishes top 5. We've had you and me talked about, I think, Bob Tonyan that one year, Evan Ingram last year. There's always tight ends who do come out of nowhere. There's a lot of guys with intriguing spots, really. They're going in these double-digit rounds on the FFPC, but they have opportunities within their teams.
Todd Burrows was talking about this, that he thought, I think it was Todd talking about this a couple of weeks ago when we were covering a live draft. He said that the third tier of tight ends this year, like, you have your starters, your sort of backups, and then you have this third tier. Says it's never been richer in talent than it is this year, and there is a lot of really good tight ends to like late in this format. Let's go back to the 9th round here, and Dalton Kincaid, speaking of tight ends, is going to be the number 1 tight end drafted here by Kenneth Ivanowski. Tight end 11 at the 906. He's a rookie. It's not like he's a rookie running back where you can probably trust him a little bit more when they were drafted in the same round, Bijan Robinson and Dalton Kincaid, but because of the difference in positions they played, I don't know if I'd really necessarily like Dalton Kincaid as my starter. But in this format, trying to beat out thousands of teams for $1 million grand prize, you already have 5 receivers on this team. Maybe I would have, if I would have looked back on it, maybe I would have taken a tight end earlier instead of one of those receivers. But I think you can do a lot worse than Kincaid here in the 9th round. Don't love it. Understand the strategy here from Kenneth Ivanowski, Aiden.
No, I understand the 2. You're shooting for the upside. I'm not a big Kincaid believer, not because of him as a player, but there is something he said is, look at the history of tight ends who went in the first round of the NFL draft and just their production. It's not
for their rookie year, right?
Yeah. I mean, right. But you could even look at beyond that. Now, Evan Ingram kind of bucked the trend late, but even their first couple of years, there's not a lot of success stories. I can pull it up if we really want to discuss it.
No, but I will say this: Pat Freiermuth was all right last year, or in his rookie year, right?
Yeah, but he was a 2nd round pick.
Oh yeah, it's a good point. Aiden getting me on the technicality, which is accurate.
That's a good point. It's a range. It's just you can't apply, I think, draft trends like that to. You have to look at it individual by individual basis. Mm-hmm. But it's just an interesting little trend. Is now Pitts you would assume would have broken it, but then last year happens, and you're kind of like, what do we have here? But I think people are really in on someone has to emerge from this Bills offense besides Diggs. And I sometimes just lean back to, and I'll ask you this, what you think. I know you said you weren't maybe as in on Kincaid. Sometimes I think maybe this is just a 2-person in terms of fantasy offense. This only is Allen and Diggs show. And then you're just going to have too many inconsistencies in this season-long management format to really comfortably trust anyone else in the Bills.
Yeah. I mean, you can trust other people, but not comfortably on Buffalo. Yeah. I mean, that's just what it is, there are Gabe Davis truthers out there, but I feel like their numbers are dwindling. Obviously, Khalil Shakir we talked about. And who's the other cat that they got this year in the draft? It was a late-round pick that the Bills drafted that ended up, he could be fighting for a significant role. And in redraft formats, you'd have to look at him. And I'm really blanking on the name, and I feel so bad because so many, I've had more than a half dozen high-stakes players tell me, you need to watch out for this Bills receiver this year. I'm looking it up right now. Deontay Hardy is a guy that people are talking about late, and maybe we'll see him go off the board now that I mentioned his name. But Hardy is another guy that I think you can make a case for in best ball, maybe not in this format. But yeah, I mean, you can't. I'll trust Diggs. I'll trust Josh Allen. After that, I mean, who knows? You're kind of playing the lottery at that point with the Buffalo offense, as good as it is. Let's get through the 10th round here. A lot of tight ends off the board in this round. And I want to go back to one of the questions that was posed to us in the YouTube chat by one Cobra Kai is back now that he's off the board. Damian Harris at the 1001. Tank Bigsby, number 4 running back drafted by Remy LeBeau. Back-to-back tight ends here. Dalton Schultz for Alex Balazzo. That's his number 1 tight end. CSC goes with Chega Okonkwo, tight end 14 tonight at the 1004. That's his number 1 tight end. Rashad Bateman joining Rich Bilyeu's team. Jerick McKinnon to Golden Foot 4. Jalen Warren to the Dark Forest is his number 3 running back. Yikes. For Kenneth Ivanowski. We'll talk about that in a second. Khalil Herbert to Black Mambas 002. That's Bobby Smith. Greg Dulcich joining Dallas Goedert in the tight end room for Scott Schoenwolf. Devon Achane, Elijah Mitchell, pair of running backs go off the board to Bitcoin and Sniped. And then Cole Kmet, who will join Kyle Pitts for the tight end core that Brandon McClain is building from the 1 spot tonight. Cole Kmet off the board at the 10-12. So the question we got in the YouTube chat from Cobra Kai is back. I think it was Cobra Kai is back as I scroll back on it. No, it wasn't. It was Dominic Gazzetti. My apologies. Dominic wants to know that, he lets us know that Chig was one of his favorite tight ends to target in his mock drafts. Do you still think he is going to earn a great target share per route run now that they have DeAndre Hopkins fill in the blank there for you? I like Chig Okonkwo, Dominic, a lot more than I did prior to DeAndre Hopkins getting there. Before, I think if you waited on tight end, Okonkwo, I think is okay as a 10, 11, 12, like somewhere around there, tight end off the board. Man, I don't trust him now at all. Like he'd be a guy I'd be drafting after the 15 or 16 tight ends are off the board. He went tonight as tight end 14. I think he drops even more than that as far as if I was personally drafting a tight end premium team. Now, CSC didn't have a tight end yet on his team, which probably made him a little bit more willing to take Chig Okonkwo there. But I think more often than not, he's going to go later than the 10th round because of Hopkins, Aiden.
There's just only so many passes to go around in that offense. They're not going to throw it a ton. And when they are, I just don't trust the quarterback play at all. Mm-hmm. I like him as a talent. Obviously, last year he produced, and at times it was a really rough offense. They love him as an athlete. But yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. We really covered a lot of it, I think, with our Hopkins and Burks conversation. I think it applies to it. It's just that target share is not going to be there. You're going to be relying on maybe injuries to players, which are obviously incredibly unpredictable. I don't know if I'm fully out. I would like to see the ADP drop a bit more, which I think I thought it would a bit. But in both Burks and Okonkwo's case, it didn't do a ton in this specific draft. So, yeah, I think there is points I would take him because I think he is worth the upside for the talent he possesses. But you said it, the Hopkins really hurts the two tight ends receivers that we were targeting prior to this.
And I'll tell you, for CSC's team, not having a tight end in the first 9 rounds to get a guy like Chig Okonkwo in the 10th, yes, I understand why you would do that. You're trying to win $1 million. You have to have some semblance of a tight end. He went tight end, double tap the position here in the 11th round. We'll get to that in a second. So I think he's doing it right.
He's going for the upside tight end plays, which is what I would do if you're waiting.
And like, I think we talk about this, and I mention this all the time. Joe Delzanero, Baker Boy, he's like the Yogi Berra of fantasy football, where he has all these interesting takes, but they all happen to be right if you think about it. So there's no such thing as a bad pick after the 10th round. Now, Chig Okonkwo was in the 10th round, but now I feel like these guys all, like, to borrow a term from Draft Sharks, we're in the 11th round, switch to upside mode at this point. Like, now you got to start, instead of swinging for singles and swinging for doubles, now swing for those triples, swing for those home runs, because those are the types of players that can really separate you from, separate the wheat from the chaff, the guys that are going to be really good in this format to help you get that $1 million grand prize. CSC did it with a pair of picks here in the 10th and the 11th round, given how his team was put together. I want to talk about Dark Forest. That's Kenneth Ivanowski's team. Let's get through the 11th round here, and then we'll talk about his team. Irv Smith, the 3rd tight end drafted by Brandon McClain here. He goes with Kyle Pitts and Cole Kmet here from the 1 spot. Now, 3 tight ends for McClain's squad. Sniped. That's Nicholas Barnes. He finally has his first quarterback. That is Anthony Richardson, the 10th quarterback off the board tonight. Nico Collins joins Olave, Watson, and Addison in the wide receiver room for Biplab Mandel. Tua Tagovailoa will be backing up Deshaun Watson tonight, the first team to back up quarterbacks. Tagovailoa goes with Watson and the Scott Schoenwolf Wolf Brothers free donation squad at the 11:04. Juwan Johnson, the starting tight end for Bobby Smith at the 11:05. Rashawn Johnson, the number 4 running back drafted by Kenneth Ivanowski. Daniel Jones, the number 1 quarterback for Can Bacon here at the 11:07 tonight. A couple more tight ends, a lot of tight ends in this round. Gerald Everett to Rich Bilyeu, backing up Pat Freiermuth. Sam Laporta was the other tight end we were talking about for CSC. Goes Chig Okonkwo and Sam Laporta in back-to-back picks here. Jamal Williams, Tyjae Spears, a couple of running backs to Spearmint Rhinos and Remy LeBeau, respectively. And then Jacoby Myers, the target hog, formerly of New England, now taking his talents to Las Vegas. The final pick of the 11th round tonight, and the 5th wide receiver drafted by Greg Chamberlain here is Jacoby Myers, the 53rd receiver off the board. What do you think Brandon McClain's doing here in the 1 spot? He already had Pitts. Why go Kmet and Irv Smith here back-to-back in the 10th and 11th round? I know he's got 4 running backs, but only 3 receivers. it's interesting here to load up on that. Now, you can start if you wanted to. You could start 3 tight ends every single week in the FFPC, but I'm not sure what he's doing here.
Komet makes sense. I know it's a little lesser than Bessel, but still you get the stack with Fields. The Irv Smith pick is one that I'm not. I would love to hear some reasoning behind. I don't see it. But as you said, I do agree. You're kind of in the point of the draft where it really starts to pivot, where even if there's some interesting picks, there's only so many that can really truly knock. I think, but they're not bulk. You mentioned 3 receivers. 2 of them are Kadarius Toney and Michael Thomas. So there's a high likelihood that's one receiver you have right now at multiple points this year. So yeah, I'm not. Well, I don't love the last 3 rounds. Michael Thomas, I go back and forth on Michael Thomas because everything is telling me he's going to be hurt again. But maybe if there's that chance he's finally healthy or they got it cleaned up, I think he fits Derek Carr well, especially with Olave taking up so much attention. But Bijan Robinson, which is a low upside running back play, Komet and Irv Smith.
Yeah, well, I will say that. Sorry to interrupt you, Aiden, but I will say, Biplab Mandel pointed out Jamar Chase was already on McLean's squad at the 101 tonight. He says Irv Smith is correlated with Chase there, which I guess I can understand at that point. Would I be doing that? Probably not, but Brandon McLean's won a lot more money in the FFPC than I have, so I'll check to the better on that one. The other team I wanted to talk about here in the 11th round, Kenneth Ivanowski's team. He has 5 of his first 7 picks tonight as receivers, and the running backs really paid the price. J.K. Dobbins is his number 1. Okay. Rashad Penny is your number 2. I don't like that. And then Jalen Warren off the board is your 3. I can get on board with Rashawn Johnson as your 4, but man, he's going to need one of those running backs to hit. And I guess maybe that's the position I want to be weak at. But he's already kind of weak at tight end in comparison with the rest of the league. I know Kincaid and Josh Allen are stacked together with Gabe Davis on this team, so there's that to like. But a lot of great receivers on this team, but not loving the tight end, not loving the running backs here, Aiden.
Yeah, Dobbins. The idea of Dobbins I like, but there is just.
But in the fourth round, okay, like that, like I can get on board with that.
But you pass on Aaron Jones, pass on Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to pass on Aaron Jones.
It's if I'm trying to look at this in an isolated bubble, yes, I don't mind. But I look at some of the guys I passed up on, and again, it's all personal preference. A lot of these players have, as you said, won way more money than the 2 of us. We're here just analyzing this draft and commentating on it, but don't love that. And even look at the 2 names after Rashad Penny, James Cook and Antonio Gibson. I think have way higher ceilings than he does, simply because Cook, again, if you're talking about that Bills offense, if you're wanting someone, I think he's a chance as someone who could take on an expanded role. Antonio Gibson, I've been open about. I really like. I'm just hoping that the enemy uses the weapon that Antonio Gibson is. I understand the idea of Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny's shown to be talented, but talk about it, he's literally never once been healthy in the NFL. The Eagles love doing a running back by committee. Not only is Swift there, who I think probably is the most talented back. They use Kenneth Gainwell. They use Boston Scott. There's just it's in an isolated bubble. I don't love it. Looking at the guys he passed on, I don't like it even more.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Like, I'd like this team a lot more if it was Jones instead of Dobbins. Yeah. I'd like it a lot more if it was Gibson instead of Penny, or Cook instead of Penny, right? And then in the I think I'd much rather have Khalil Herbert than Jalen Warren, right? I have no problem with Rashawn Johnson, but man, now we're picking at nits as far as player evaluation, which, to each their own. Let's get into the 12th round here. Chase Brown off the board at the 1201. That is the number 4 running back drafted by Greg Chamberlain here in the 12th spot. Odell Beckham, the third Baltimore receiver taken, right? Behind Bateman and Flowers off the board. Odell Beckham goes to Remy LeBeau here. Adam Thielen, the number 1, at least we think, receiver for Carolina at the 1203. Dak Prescott will be the number 1 quarterback for CSC. Tyler Algier joining Samaje Perine, Rashad White, and Nick Chubb in the Facts and Tendencies Rich Bilyeu and Son backfield. Geno Smith backing up Daniel Jones to Golden Foot 4, like the double tap there. Rashee Rice, Alan Lazard to the Dark Forest and Black Mambas 002. Then Devin Singletary, the number 4 running back drafted by Scott Schoenwolf. Bunch of receivers to end the 12th round here. You're looking at Darnell Mooney to Biplab Mandel, Jonathan Mingo, and Tyler Boyd Mingo to Sniped, and then Boyd to Brandon McLean's Frenchie squad. I forgot to point this out in the YouTube chat, and I'm sorry that I missed this. But if we look back, Jim Herezi pointed this out, and this was about 20 minutes or so ago, so things have changed. But he thought teams 3, 6, and 12 were winning the draft so far. And that was Biplab Mandel, that was Kenneth Ivanowski, and that was Greg Chamberlain. Let's talk about Bip's team here real quick, because I do like the way that he's formulated this. He got the Mahomes-Kelsey stack, which, as Darren Armani has pointed out, especially in the FFPC main event, maybe losing its shine a little bit because so many people have that stack already. But he has the stack. Then he gets Olave, Christian Watson, Addison, Collins, and Mooney. There's a lot of upside there, right? Olave should have a great season. Watson, we'll see. I mean, he could. I know he's going to be a big play receiver this year. He could also be the number one receiver there in Green Bay as far as targets go over Romeo Doubs. I know I'm probably in the minority in that right now, at least in Northeast Wisconsin. I probably am. Jordan Addison, upside. Nico Collins, upside. Darnell Mooney, upside. Juju Smith-Schuster, as long as he's healthy, upside there. I like David Njoku where he got him, the 10th tight end off the board, putting the pressure on the other squad that didn't have tight ends yet. He gets that with Travis Kelce. And then the running backs here. Obviously not the strongest part of his team, but getting Akers, Sanders, and Pierce, 3 guys that should have a lot of touches this year to go along with Devin Achane, a potential game breaker. I do like this number 3 squad drafted by Biplab Mandel. That's Bitcoin tonight, Aiden.
When does this man have a bad draft? I don't try and play favorites, but genuinely, every time I do it and Bip's in this room, it's, this is a squad. I mean, he delivers in that respect. The running back, again, I've talked about it a bunch. I don't like repeating, but every time it just is so shocking to me still to see is last year we hit that running back dead zone hard. This year it's the opposite. The running backs in some of these 4th through 8th round, I'm just loving the value you're getting. Yeah. I'm all over Cam Akers. I know he finished now well removed from the Achilles injury and the Achilles surgery. That's far, far back in the past. He really performed late in the year. He's literally the only running back there. You look at his competition, Zach Evans, 6th round rookie pick. I think Akers is due for a big workload. Miles Sanders is going to go down as the biggest running back free signing in terms of contract-wise this season. I didn't love the signing. I don't love Miles Sanders, the player. I still question, obviously, last year was maybe one of his first healthy years. But again, the opportunity is there in a Carolina offense that last year showed that they could have a great rush game, even without McCaffrey. Deontay Foreman and Chuba collectively really performed great. And Damian Pierce, I mean, he had all the shine last year, that rapid rise up as all those positive reports came out. Largely delivered on those. I think he had a really good season, and then I kind of expected. I mean, I didn't know what people expected for a guy who had very limited touches coming to the NFL. He was always kind of going to wear down, which is what happened. But I think he's kind of a value in drafts. I know they signed Singletary, but Pierce ran really well at his apex last year. So, and you mentioned Achane, who I've mentioned before. Let's say Dalvin Cook doesn't sign there. Achane's the most talented back in Miami. Sure as hell going to use the speed that he possesses. So yeah, I think I don't mind those running backs. I think he's had an exceptional draft. People, I'm sure I think you do. I would assume you do. Terps all over. Christian Watson, people love. People are all in on Olave. Got to rep Jordan Addison. He's a member of the 301. He's from my haunts in Maryland. So he's a Montgomery Village Football Club alum. So I like that. I like the Vikings offense. And then Nico, I mean, yeah, I'm going over every pick and saying it's good, but it really has. It hasn't really. I mean, Juju, maybe the first pick on my hand, like you said, upside, which is not a word I would ever associate with Juju Smith-Schuster.
But at that point in the draft, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, no, agreed with you, because at this point in the draft, like again, 13th round, but
for a guy who could be or probably should be the number 1 receiver on his team, wide receiver 62 in the 13th round. I mean, that's. Yeah. And I know the knee thing, and yeah, I get it, but like, and he probably will not be setting the world on fire. But when you look at it from just a base number crunching level, he should be the most heavily targeted receiver there. He's done it before. He's had a lot of really good seasons, maybe not a lot of really, but he's had a couple of really good seasons, and you're getting him in the 13th round.
I think that's interesting.
That's the triple play right there.
In some ways, Bip did a really good job of flipping it, where I think he shot for a lot of upside early on players, not lottery ticket in terms of potential, in terms of guys who are going to be very good but have a potential to be really great. And then maybe he's going to go again with Juju as kind of a safer ticket here in the 13th round, as a guy who, as you said, he is the wide receiver one in that offense.
Yeah.
Hopefully Bill O'Brien can figure some of it out. But even Darnell Mooney, I don't think I've talked about him once in any of our live draft coverage, but there's a part of me, if Fields can improve as a passer, they got DJ Moore, so Darnell Mooney was not going to be the focus of the defense. Maybe he's a little bit of a post-type sleeper as a guy who we've seen had some really good years. Maybe if he comes in healthy as the wide receiver too, which is probably what he's better suited at, could turn a value if that Bears offense continues to improve, specifically the passing game.
I do want to point out that Bip Mandel, as we were talking about his team, he said Devon Achane is his weeks 14 through $17 million run. And when you have those three running backs there, chances are one of them is not going to be performing. One of them is not going to be crushing it. And it will be easier to put Achane in there when you're trying to win $1 million. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But like, you're not in this league to try to win your league out of 12 teams. Yes, that helps to try to get to the championship round. But like, you're in this to take your shot at $1 million, right? And Achane is a perfect player to win you that $1 million. Okay. Nicholas Barnes is in the YouTube chat right now. He wants us to do a review of Team 2, which is him. And he says, and I got to step away just for a second, Aiden, but I'm going to tell you this right now. We can only review his team if it's 100% positive. So be positive on this team. I'll be back in a second.
Be positive on this team. I think I can do that. I mean, Justin Jefferson, nothing to talk about with that pick. You're taking Justin Jefferson, you lock it in, send it to the bank, and you feel great. I like Breece Hall. We talked about Gibbs. I'm a big Gibbs believer. I'm a big Kenneth Walker believer simply because of what I saw last year. I think if you're going 3 running backs in the first 4 rounds, you do it when you have a guy like Justin Jefferson already in the bag. And you went with 3 young, high upside running backs. My thing on Breece Hall is, I know there's injury concerns, but there is that flip side. Well, if he comes back healthy, even if it takes a bit, you're getting a Breece Hall who's probably going to hit peak Breece Hall, 100% Breece Hall, when you need him, those late regular season and then come fantasy playoffs. Drake London scares me because of just the Falcons offense. I think I've talked about it a lot. I'm all in on Bijan. I just don't know if Drake London and Kyle Pitts are going to be sustainable. Ritter, I'm not a believer in. We talked about Tyler Lockett, we love. Talked about Evan Ingram. Kamara, there is something there. I'm just, again, you're expecting a 6-game suspension. If that doesn't happen, I mean, all of a sudden you're getting some value because Derek Carr there, you're hoping improves the offense. Kamara, again, another guy who underlying metrics aren't too kind to him. They're drafting a running back with Kendra Miller. Obviously, he's been put on the non-football injury list today. Jamal Williams is there. Could be a touchdown vulture, but still Kamara in the passing game you trust. Love Jamison Williams. I am in on that Lions offense. It's just a shame he's suspended. Elijah Mitchell. I mean, again, I've talked about it. That's why I'm out on McCaffrey, is the fact that when Elijah Mitchell's healthy, which is rare, but when he was last year, pretty split carries. McCaffrey didn't get a ton of carries. It wasn't overwhelming. Mitchell got his touches. Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, I'm a believer in. But
I guess that's the question here is like, what do you think about, because now we're through 14 picks for him. Richardson's his only quarterback, and we have 15 quarterbacks off the board.
I just go back and forth because I just feel as though the upside's there, but it could take a while. I just don't think early on. I just wonder if when Richardson is your quarterback, you don't want to dig yourself too deep of a hole. The talent's there, but I think it takes some time. I think he's personally, especially in redraft, I think he's a guy that I'm really going to start looking at year 2, year 3 of his career. I just don't think that rookie year is going to be the most kind, despite I think there's going to be some big weeks. I think there's going to be a lot of bad weeks. He's not fully there as a passer. And he also only has like 12, 13 games of experience at Florida, which is not, It's not a ton. It's going to take some time with him. I love the Mingo upside. I love the Mims upside. And Terp's kind of starting to confirm me because he's talked a lot about Trey McBride. Is same reason I love James Conner went to 7-11, which was almost a round of value way earlier today. Someone in Arizona is going to get fantasy points. You see even the worst team, someone there is going to be fantasy viable. It's just about figuring out who it is. That's why I'm in on Conner, especially as his ADP keeps kind of settling in that late 6th, 7th round. I think he's going to be, if healthy, I think he's going to put together a solid fantasy season. But McBride, I think, is a lot of people are feeling the same way. So honestly, team 2 largely, I think, is doing a very solid job.
I do want to see what happens here in the 15th round. Nicholas Barnes is on the clock right now. There's 3 quarterbacks off the top of my head that I think would be perfect to pair with Anthony Richardson, and he just got one of them. Jared Goff, which I really like. I that was one of them. Maybe not the one I would have went with, but maybe it would. Like we're talking about this.
I love Goff. If you're in on that offense and look at his schedule, come fantasy playoffs, he's gonna I believe Cowboys Lions. It's week 17. I believe that's what it is. That's a juicy fantasy matchup in what is going to be the last round of the Fantasy Pros Championship finals. So
and let me say this right now. I misspoke. I looked at his team. That is the quarterback I would have drafted, and he just pointed out in the YouTube chat right now. You're looking at Jared Goff. You're looking
at JMO didn't even pick.
Jamison Williams, Whiskey Bill, as they call him on the GOAT District, and then Jahmyr Gibbs. So now all of a sudden you have the massive Detroit stack, and yes, a Detroit stack is a thing this year. So congratulations, we like that pick. We like that pick.
As a Packers fan, are the Lions just so consistently bad that you almost have like a tender spot in your heart where you kind of root for them just a bit because it's just like, oh, they're so lovable and bad?
2 reasons why I don't. Number one, I think this year is going to be different. The Lions are the odds-on favorite to win the division, and they have the best odds to make the playoffs this year. So it's hard to be like, oh, this is so cute, Detroit. Can't do it. Number 2, I commission a lot of online fantasy football drafts, obviously, as you know. Bryce, the other commissioner, my best friend, is a massive Lions fan, and will talk to no end anytime the Lions do anything good. So will I be holding at least?
So you've had no shit talk from him pretty much your whole life.
No, he still does, because usually at the end of the season, the Lions end up beating the Packers, and sometimes it matters and sometimes it doesn't. And then he holds it over me for a full off season, which I don't like.
Was the Matt Flynn game against the Lions?
Yeah, it was against the Lions. Yeah,
that's one of my favorite Lions. One of my favorite videos is the Lions fans on the Rodgers to Richard Rodgers Hail Mary on Thursday Night Football. And it was Big Cat from Barstool was there with the Lions fans, and just their reactions of it was just every fan just kind of sat down. It wasn't even a visible reaction. It wasn't even an animated, just like, this is what happens.
I still, there are a few plays as a Packers fan that I will watch, just rewatch on YouTube. The Greg Jennings catch at the end of the Super Bowl, the Richard Rodgers Hail Mary catch, the Randall Cobb catch on 4th down against the Bears, essentially to put the Packers in the playoffs, the B.J. Raji interception against Caleb Haney in the NFC Championship game that put the Packers in the Super Bowl. But that Richard Rodgers one, I was watching it in my basement because the game was at the Silverdome or whatever, Ford Field in Detroit, and I had given up on the game. And then there was some would say BS face mask call at the end of that game, where the play got extended for an untimed down, and that's when Rodgers hit. Richard Rodgers, who wasn't even supposed to be catching the ball, he was supposed to be hanging back for the tip back to him if there was a tip. He went up and grabbed it. And interestingly enough, I don't know if you know this, Richard Rodgers' dad played football at Cal. He was in that the band is on the field play between Cal and Stanford. So it's just weird that father and son playing, in 2 of the games that are iconic in football history, which is crazy to think about. But that Richard Rodgers one was absolutely crazy town banana pants. We'll never forget it for the rest of my life. Amon-Ra St. Brown trolled Green Bay Packers fans this week when they did this player's choice thing on the NFL Network, where random players would get to choose whatever replay of a game they wanted on. Amon-Ra St. Brown chose the NFC Championship game from, I can't remember when it was, 2012 or 2011, when the Seahawks made that massive comeback in Seattle and beat the Packers. That was Amon-Ra St. Brown's choice. Somebody should be choosing from the Green Bay Packers, should be choosing the Lions Hail Mary play with Rodgers and Rodgers as the player's choice. I don't know who's going to do it, but it'd be certainly great if that did happen. Anyway, no one cares here on this one. Let's get back.
We got sidetracked for a
round. This is what I do. I get sidetracked. I love hearing the sound of my own voice. This is what happens.
We're in the 15th round. That's what we do.
All right. So the other, we had not talked about the Team 12 here. which according to our YouTube friend that is watching the draft tonight, and I apologize for his name, Jim Herezi, said that he thought Team 12 is having a really good draft as well. Let's analyze this. Amon-Ra St. Brown was the first pick tonight. So you're looking at this squad here. You have Lamar Jackson, which is great. I love that pick in the 4th round. And then the running backs, Jacobs, again, I still think is a good value. Give me the running backs that could potentially hold out because I think that they are in for solid seasons. They're not going to hold out, and they will be good draft value right now in FFPC drafts. So Jacobs, Montgomery, Harris, Chase Brown, Ty Chandler. Okay, not a lot to write home about behind Jacobs. The receivers, though, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Chris Godwin, who's getting steamed up by a lot of the pundits and the fantasy high-stakes players out there. Brandon Ayuk, Elijah Moore, Jacoby Myers, Rondale Moore, Isaiah Hodgins. I think there's a good amount of upside there. And Team 12 also made sure that they had their second tight end here in the 9th round. They get Mark Andrews in the 2nd. They don't ignore the position. They get Higbee in the 9th. Remember, if anything happens to Andrews, he still has a top 12 tight end to put inside his lineup. If nothing happens to Andrews and maybe something happens to somebody else, Tyler Higbee makes a fine flex choice there as well. Consider the Baltimore stack with Andrews and Jackson. I think this is a great team as long as these running backs hit, which, again, you can't be strong everywhere, Aiden. I'll be weak at running back. Hopefully one of these running backs hits.
I'm not as high on this team as the chat is. I like the start. I like the Andrews and Lamar stack is always going to be cheeky. As we kind of talked about, I'm not high on Josh Jacobs, but end of the 3rd, I think there is a high likelihood he does end up playing compared to Saquon. Chris Godwin's getting steamed up, as you said. Baker Mayfield's a quarterback. I've watched Baker Mayfield a lot. That offense wasn't great. I know the last year with Tom Brady. I'm staying away from Evans and Godwin. Even Rashad White I've cooled on, and that's just, again, I don't think that offense is going to be productive at all. Ayuk I like just behind the rationale of, well, I don't think all these Niners can be productive, but all these Niners always get hurt. So one of them.
Let me stop you right there. Because for the Niners, you have McCaffrey just using tonight's draft as an example. McCaffrey at the 104. Brandon Ayuk goes tonight at the 601. Deebo Samuel off the board. We didn't talk about him at the 409. George Kittle at the 402. Who's the quarterback? We think it's Brock Purdy. It could be Sam Darnold. It could even be Trey Lance. Is there something to be said? And I bring this up. Dizzle brought this up several years ago. I brought this up on the show so many times. I remember back in the day when Tom Brady was throwing to Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, Brandon Lloyd, Julian Edelman. And Dizzle said, Balky, one of these guys is going to be a bust. I just don't know which one it is yet. Now, it ended up being Brandon Lloyd. He was the massive bust. But these guys were all going super high. And I wonder if there's a parallel this year between these Niners pass catchers with Kittle, Ayuk, Samuel, and McCaffrey all going super high. You're talking about Ayuk being the latest one. He almost went in the 5th round tonight. And I wonder if all these guys can return value because they don't have Tom Brady throwing to them like New England did all those years ago. They got Brock Purdy and maybe some other players that aren't as good as Brock Purdy.
And just also look at Shanahan and the schemes is you have guys catching touchdowns, you're getting schemed open out of nowhere. Right? We've seen it many times with them. I believe I'm going to blank like Jawan Jennings, Ray McLeod's getting touches.
Richie James, right? Richie James.
Yeah. At some points it's just, not that those guys are going to be week to week, but just idea of on a weekly basis that there's just going to be some weeks where just random people are just going to be getting touches. No, not all of them are going to return value, but I think it's more so to be something to set is not even them busting as much as just a lot of them are CMC. We've seen obviously last year he was healthy, but we've seen a lot of injuries. Debo supposedly in way better shape, but he was banged up last year. Yeah, Kittle's hurt a lot. Some of them, and that's kind of where you're buying in is, well, if you can get the guy who isn't hurt, they're going to get a ton of touches because each year we see a couple of them break out and have huge years because everyone else is hurt. So I'm less worried about McCaffrey in the run game because the Niners run game always seems to be produced. But between those 3 pass catchers, we talked about the Seahawks. I think there's more of a chance that the 3 Seahawks pass catchers could return on their value than all 3 of those Niners receivers.
Mac Nova in the YouTube chat, who drafts in the Fantasy Pros Championship, said that he thinks as far as what team is the best here, he likes 7. And this is a team we haven't talked about. This is Can Bacon's team, the Golden Foot 4 franchise here from the 7 spot tonight. And as we look at his squad, quarterback. I already talked about how I like the quarterback. I love the double tap. You wait till this is such a bulky thing to do. You wait till after the 10th round. You grab a quarterback and you grab another quarterback right after that. So you get Jones and you get Geno Smith. So I like that for sure. Getting Hawkinson and Waller, you are elite at tight end. You have the best tight end duo in this whole league. So obviously you love that. Running back, or no, let's get to receiver here. Kupp, Waddle, Mike Will made it, and then Michael Pittman there, but as your top 4 receivers, followed by Zay Flowers. Now, he has not gone back to the wide receiver well yet. Looking at 5 receivers in the first 9 picks, but that's it so far. He's got an opportunity to go back and grab some pass catchers here. But the running backs, Mixon, Charbonnet, McKinnon, Fournette, Elliott, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a squad that knows it's weak at running back and knows it's got to take a lot. It's got to fire a lot of bullets at the target to try to get that second running back to hit. Maybe it's Zach Charbonnet. Maybe it's not. And if it's not, it's got to be McKinnon. Could be Leonard Fournette. If he signs somewhere, Ezekiel Elliott. If he comes back to the Cowboys, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, you look at him. His value is the most depressed it's been since he's been in the NFL. So I think that what's interesting about this squad is just the 5 receivers in the first 9 rounds, but then all the bullets that he's firing at running back here, and he's on the clock here in the 17th. We'll see what happens here. Another running back, that's Joshua Kelly to Can Bacon's team. So I look at this squad. One of these running backs have to hit, and I think they will, and it doesn't have to be the same one every week. I mean, you have windows of running back value here, and I think that could work out here. But the receivers have to stay healthy here, Aiden, and I think if the receivers stay healthy, man, I'm a fan of this team. But you're not, and that's okay.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on this team.
That's true, yes.
Biff's in the chat talking. No, if I'm known for one small thing in the high stakes community, I mean, you tell 18-year-old me, like, hey, you're going to be known for one little thing in the high stakes community, and it's being his hatred for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Sure, I'll take that. I don't have anything else going for me.
16th round, you cannot hate anybody in the 16th round.
I'll give an honest opinion. Love Kupp. Love Waddle. I'm in on Kupp. I cooled a bit again on it, but at the start of it, like when me interpreted our never too early best ball coverage and all that, I was like, Kupp's my wide receiver 1. Some of the concerns I want to see. Whoa, Mason. I've been very complimentary.
Mason's fan. Aiden's not a fan of anything, is he? No, he hates fantasy football, little puppies, a freshly baked pizza. He hates everything.
No, Clyde
but not UK basketball. He loves Kentucky basketball.
That is one. Sometimes. Why is my biggest hobby with sports just something that I have zero control over? Right, and more often than not, makes me upset. Like, why do we do this? I like double tapping Hawkinson and Waller, as you said. I do like the Daniel Jones and Geno Smith. Kind of interesting. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Aiden grooms his beard, as Richard Mallon is saying. Aiden grooms his beard. I do not. It is what it is. I'm sorry.
Usually when the chat's talking about us as host balky, it's usually probably not a good thing. But in this case, it hasn't been that bad. Usually it's this guy stinks. Get him off the screen. But
right.
I just want to say it's interesting because when you're kind of trying to fire when you waited on running backs, you kind of want to go for these lottery tickets. It's kind of interesting to me that some of these lottery tickets, in a sense, are not what we come to think of with these late round picks. It's guys who are veterans, the Fournettes, the Zekes.
They've done it before. They've had top 10 seasons before.
Yeah, it's guys who we don't know where they're going to sign. It's almost like a mystery box. It's like, you could be getting the starting running back for the Las Vegas Raiders, Leonard Fournette, in week 1 if Josh Jacobs were to hold out. Or you could be getting Leonard Fournette who somehow signs week 6 because Leonard Fournette does not want to do any offseason conditioning. Mm-hmm. Zeke, you talk about chalking Alvin to the Dolphins. I've just been chalking up Zeke is a late training camp back to the Cowboys.
Yep.
And honestly, in this late 14th round, I think he's going to deliver value because Pollard, I think we showed, can be he was top 7 running back even with Zeke. And Zeke, it's not going to be the best option, but there's going to be some weeks he falls into a couple of touchdowns. So I like those picks in terms of, I think both those guys have upside, not in terms of the talent they possess, but just in terms of the situations they could land into.
I want to talk about the other one. Mac Nova said is good. He didn't say it was the best, but he said it was good. And that's also another team that we haven't talked a whole lot about tonight. And that's Scott Schoenwolf's Wolf Brothers free donation from the 4 spot tonight, Aiden. Deshaun Watson and Tua Tagovailoa are the quarterbacks here in the 9th and the 11th round. No quarrel with those picks there. he is one of the teams. And again, we'll have to check the mojo on it. Follow Darren Armani on Twitter at Fantasy Mojo. He'll give you the skinny on how many teams started McCaffrey, Taylor, but he gets Jonathan Taylor to fall to him. And he gets two studs there, McCaffrey and Taylor, and probably changed his philosophy as far as what he's doing in the backfield. Doesn't take another running back until the 8th round. Still gets Antonio Gibson as his 3, which I'm a fan of there. Devin Singletary, Jeff Wilson, Raheem Mostert. Sure. Yep, no problem there. And then I love the way that he pounded the receivers, and he still got a stud tight end. He goes Higgins and Samuel at the 3-4. Dallas Goedert, the 6th tight end off the board, gets him in the 5th. And then he gets Marquise Brown and Mike Evans. Now, he doesn't go receiver again until Van Jefferson in the 13th. I like the Micah Gallup pick in the 15th. Tim Patrick, we'll see what happens in the 18th round with him. But you look at the tight ends on this team. I already mentioned Goddard. He gets Dulcich. I love the value as tight end 15 in the 10th round. And then Isaiah Likely, again, a guy that showed some pretty good promise when Mark Andrews went down last year. And then you're looking at getting him as your number 3 tight end 27 in the 16th round. Yeah, maybe you could have taken another running back. Maybe you could have taken another receiver instead of getting your 3rd tight end there. But as far as upside goes, I really like that there. Maybe I'm missing it. I don't see a whole lot of stacking on this squad, which is okay. I mean, you don't necessarily need it. But this is another squad, too, that is it's going to be a competitor in this league and maybe a competitor for the $1 million grand prize.
Do you see the Mojo is in the chat? You can't ask for better service than that. I mean, he's on top of it. Honestly, way less than I thought. Because I was you asking about this, I think this was one of the first questions we discussed, right? One of the first topics. And I was like, there might be more because I've seen McCaffrey at the 106, the 107, 105. And it's not, I've seen Taylor falling probably soon, but there's a lot of people, if they go McCaffrey, they're hammering wide receivers. So only 6 out of 330 leagues.
Out of 330 leagues so far, only 6 teams have Christian McCaffrey and Jonathan Taylor. And one of those 6, Scott Schoenwolf's Wolf Brothers free donation. Like I said, this may not be a free donation for the Wolf Brothers tonight, Aiden.
That is you can sign me up for that. The receivers besides T. Higgins mightily concern me though. Okay,
hold on. I know we just talked about the Niners pass catchers. You're concerned about Deebo Samuel at the 409?
For the fact of, I think, again, when I'm looking at these receivers, I'm just saying there is a conceivable chance. Deebo, I think, should be okay. But again, we talked about injuries, whatnot, the Niners game script that he could struggle. Marquise Brown, again, it goes back to what I was saying with the Cardinals. Someone's going to break out. But again, that quarterback play could be rough. Who knows what's going on there? And I've already said I'm kind of off on the Bucks. If he can just get one of the Deebo, Marquise Brown, Evans, you'll be in a good spot. Tua pick, I love. Tua is one of my favorite values. It's almost more interesting to me if you have Waddle or you have Tyreek Hill. I don't know why you're not getting Tua. It's the 10th, 11th round. It's not. But
free. This isn't best ball, though. I mean,
I don't care. I think you're getting a top 5 quarterback. Again.
Whoa! What? Tagovailoa is a top 5 quarterback for you?
I think Tua this year, if health again, I know there's the health risk. But I think you're getting a borderline top 5 quarterback for sure.
Okay. All right. I don't happen to agree with that, but I will die for your right to say it because we live in the United States of America.
I'll die in that. Now, granted, watch is going to go down.
Well, don't say that. Want to knocking on wood. Because rooting for health for Tagovailoa.
I'm rooting for. Just look at what he did last year. That offense is explosive. They chuck it around. Full belief in Mike McDaniel. Also, Tua now has an arm sleeve of tattoos on his throwing arm. I feel like that's a big deal. That's a
hold on. Is
that add into my fantasy analysis?
Does he have the Hawaiian I'm not trying to be racist, Hawaiian Polynesian tattoos? Oh, perfect. Yeah, it worked out for The Rock. It'll probably work out for Tua Tagovailoa. If you want to pattern your tattoos with the biggest movie star in the world, I think you're doing things right.
Yeah, I do think. Also, I've seen a lot of buzz. We talked about A-Shane. There's a lot of people who know a lot of stuff who are in on Jeff Wilson. Whether it be
really,
yeah,
I have not heard this. Okay,
I've seen multiple. It's just there's 2 options for it. They say that they think he's the best running back as A-Shane gets implemented in Miami, and there's also another scenario if he has a very tradable contract and teams
could
be looking like often rumored with no basis behind it is, hey, Kansas City, they want a cheap running back if Pacheco's still banged up. They don't love McKinnon giving a big workout. That Wilson might be a Kansas City Chief.
Oh, don't forget about future All-Pro Clyde Edwards-Helaire, though.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire having an All-Pro season would ruin my brand.
It would be great. I'm here for it. I probably won't happen, but I'm here for it. The what was the other thing that I saw here in the chat about Team 4? And I know what I was saying. I think you and I are coming from different standpoints on the receivers for Team 4 here too, because we both agree on Higgins. Good, love it. Yep. Wide receiver 14, sure. So Samuel, I still think there's some upside there to get him in the mid to late 4th round. But Marquise Brown, dude, in the 6th round with no DeAndre Hopkins there, with a bad Arizona team that's going to have to throw it, they can pump the ball into Brown. And I was having this conversation with Dizzle today, and he was talking about Mike Evans, and I said, it's not like Mike Evans needed Tom Brady to be good. He was good prior to Brady. He's going to be good after Brady too. So the Mayfield thing doesn't necessarily scare me a whole lot. So I think I'm higher on Samuel, Brown, and Evans than you are too on this team.
If someone wanted to in the chat, who's smarter than me and quicker, if you take out the Mike Evans Week 17 game when he had the 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, I want to see how his fantasy season was. Because you're right, he was great without Tom Brady.
Hold on. Bear in mind too, I can't remember what week it was, but remember when he dropped that 80-yard touchdown? Yeah. Just flat out dropped it. I mean, it could have been different then too. So I would say this.
That is true.
I would say that Evans maybe is more of a spike week guy than maybe his career and his previous stats would dictate. I would give you that. But I still think, as far as, I knew he was going to fall in drafts this year, but my God, as far as he's fallen, I think he's a value right now. As Matthew Berry would say, the hate has gone too far on Mike Evans. I think the Wolf brothers did a really good job getting him at the 7.
I just want to flip your point, though. People say, DJ Moore. Look, DJ Moore is good with Sam Darnold and all these mishmash of quarterbacks and Teddy Bridgewater, Baker. It won't be any worse. Oh, it was worse. I think Kyle Trask. And I think there's somebody said, my one last point, you do make a good point that before he had Tom Brady, Mike Evans was great. But that's also with Jameis Winston, who chucked the ball around 50 times a game.
Yeah.
And also Mike Evans is just way younger. So I'm out on him. Brown, I'm high. Debo, I'm not bad on it. I just do think there's just some concern there with the Niners. I'm just not fully comfortable with them. But as you said, the 4th round, we saw what Debo did 2 years ago. And if he's, by all reports, coming in better shape, there's some plays, just isolated plays where you look at Debo last year. And if there's reports that he wasn't in great shape, he's doing that in bad shape. Imagine him coming in great shape to training camp and all that, because he had the holdout and whatnot. I think Debo has some upside, but yeah, I'm disagreeing with you on Mike Evans. I'll give that's about the only one.
This is perfect because I want to play a game. I used to play with Dizzle all the time when he co-hosted the HSFFOer with me, and I played it with Farrell a couple of times. It's called Would You Rather. You are going to tell me, we're going to do a Mike Evans Would You Rather here. I'm going to go with the wide receivers that went off the board after Mike Evans tonight. So the Wolf brothers could have picked. And we'll look at this in a vacuum here tonight, just in general.
Yeah.
Aiden LaCorey, Mike Evans or Jackson Smith-Njigba?
Smith-Njigba.
Mike Evans or Gabe Davis?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans or Michael Pittman?
Pittman.
Michael Evans or Quentin Johnston?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans or Elijah Moore?
Mike Evans.
Mike Evans or George Pickens?
The point you're trying to make to me is, hey, Aiden, you're really not taking that many more guys over.
Is,
you're right. I'm realizing that now.
I don't think you're as low on Evans as you might think you are, given the other players that are out there.
Yeah, I guess I'm more just looking at the build. I don't love it within. I'm like, these receivers are scary. But I see what you're saying now. For the record, dude, Pickens or Mike Evans would be like, I go back and forth with Pickens every day. I love Deontay, so probably Evans over Pickens. But I do see the point you're trying to make to me. And so I'm like, I do realize
the thing is, like, now. I think, because you and I have been looking at these drafts in the FFPC now for 6 months, whenever we launched drafts for 2023. And I think, like, we have seen Mike Evans plummet, right? But now, to me, I look at it, he's plummeted so far. He still hasn't raised up to the point where I'm like, okay, yeah, we need to be seriously looking at picking other players than Mike Evans. He's still down there. 704 tonight as wide receiver 36. If you look at his ADP, wide receiver 33 at the 702, I can still get on board with him. I'm not going to love it, but man, if he's my number 4 receiver there, like he is with the Wolf brothers tonight, again, you only have to start 2 receivers in this format. I think there's a lot to like with Evans' ADP. Maybe you don't like the player as much as you used to, and I don't either. But maybe there's more to like with the Evans ADP right now than the player itself.
And Mason Spain makes a great point, because it is a pet peeve of mine that I just committed. Is oh, well, if you take this away, then they're not. It's busy. It did happen. We're not taking it away. That's something that happened. In terms of the Mike Evans, the big game, the 3 touchdown 200-yard game, I just think it overall made his season look way better when you look at it at more of a week-to-week basis. There were so many weeks he was not a startable player, and that's what's concerning when he had Tom Brady. Now you're downgrading to Baker Mayfield, and you have yet another year of just NFL wear and tear on the body. So that's why I'm pretty much complete out on him on Godwin.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are done with this Fantasy Pros Championship draft. 20 rounds in, all 12 teams done. We've looked at a lot of teams tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We've looked at Team 1 with Brandon McLean, who, by the way, just took Taysom Hill with his last pick. 4 tight ends off the board. You are looking at Biplab Mandel's team from the 3 spot, who we analyzed. We just got done talking about Scott Schoenwolf's team from the 4. We analyzed Kenneth Ifanowski's team at the 6. We looked at Can Bacon's team from the 7. We also took a hard look at Greg Chamberlain's team at the 12. I want to welcome in our guest. Aiden, are you hanging out for this?
I'm hanging out for this, ball.
You're the man. Perfect. Okay. So I want to welcome in tonight's guest. Now that the draft is over, we're going to get his thoughts on how this worked out for him. He drafted from the 11 spot tonight. He is a champion. Just started playing in the FFPC last year. He is a champion of 2 of the 5 teams he drafted last year in the FPC. He is looking for more this year, as Farrell Elliott, my co-host on Friday nights, like to say. He has expanded his territory. Please welcome in Team 11 tonight, drafting tonight. It is Remy LeBeau. Remy, welcome in tonight, man. Great draft. Congratulations. How do you feel?
I'm really loving this draft. I'm not going to lie. A lot of things fell in place for us. I have my co-manager here, and we were brainstorming on what type of, build we wanted here, and we knew that we wanted to start off in the 11th spot with 2 wide receivers. What do you guys think about it?
Well,
Go ahead and dissect it.
We talked about it briefly. We're going to get into it tonight here. But and we'll let you know our thoughts. But Remy, the first question I want to ask you, and Aiden's going to ask you a bunch of follow-ups to this. How many times have you gotten the 11th spot? And by the way, shout out your co-manager. I always want to give him a shout out, and I always forget. Shout out your co-manager to answer this question. And how many times have you been drafting from the 11th hole so far this season?
This is only the second time I got the 11th hole. I've only had the 12th spot 1 time. Everything else has been in the front part of the draft. I think I've maybe had 4, 6 through 8, 6 through 9, everything else. And we've drafted at least, I want to say 25 teams. So we're quite up there on the teams. And like I said before, we use the stack finder to see exactly how to build our team so we're not duplicating a lot of things. But for this one, I'm really liking it.
No, I think that is my perspective. I think you drafted a really solid team. I love the Kirk ETN, Trevor Lawrence, because I talked extensively on tonight's show that I'm in on that Jaguars offense. So I'm going to be in on those kind of the stack you had there. AJ Brown, fantastic. Devontae, as you said, your goal was coming in at this 11th spot going receiver. Although I know it sounds crazy because it's not the sexiest name, but James Conner might have been one of my favorite picks. I'm just in on If the Health and this 7-11, which is almost a round of value. I think he's going to produce for that Cardinals offense and be a genuine startable running back week after week. Someone you're getting super late just by product of him being one of the only names with Marquise Brown in that offense. But Remy, my first kind of question for you is taking a little more broad is in these big national tournaments when you have so many teams, do you have a strategy when you're doing all of these drafts that you go into? Are you trying to diversify the players you own? So what's your strategy when factoring in these national tournaments?
Well, as I said on previous streams, the FFPC is a different beast because you have to win to get up to the 12th. You have the 12 weeks, and then after that, you have the best ball. So you have to kind of take that in consideration when you're doing this. I found out last year doing this, I took Jalen Hurts in, I think, 4 out of 5 of my teams. I took him, but we didn't have a backup quarterback, and we went to the waiver wire. We picked up the wrong quarterback, which was Ryan Tannehill, which both got hurt. So we didn't finish where we, of course, wanted to after we got there. So we learned this time, you kind of want to take a second quarterback, even though that you're spending your draft capital with that 5 spot or in this 6 spot this time. So these are one of the lessons that we learned in this. And I know a lot of people, like I said before, as far as handcuffing running backs, everybody else is always taking your handcuff running back. So why don't you take your own? And that's our philosophy. If you get down there and you think Israel is going to be better than Breece Hall, then why aren't you just handcuffing your own stuff? Because guess what? Breece Hall goes down, they're coming after your handcuff. I mean, they are. So you might as well just have it on earth. So if you look at my build, we have Ingram for Connor's backup. And who else did we take?
Zach Evans too in Los Angeles. That was another one.
Goes down.
Yep.
Zach Evans, Josh Jacobs.
Yeah. So we kind of hammered those who we think are weak, and we'll get playing time. Like Tajay Spears, that's a great pick, great value at that spot for me with this type of build. And Tank Bisbee, we took.
Yep.
Yeah, it's another Jacksonville, but guess what? If ETN goes down, everybody be flocking to the waiver wire to get them. So I might as well take my own handcuff in that spot.
And then just kind of expanding on that, you obviously are going to have kind of changes in your approach based on what you learned from last year, but did at all the expansion of this specific contest, the jump in the number of teams, change how you approached it, or did you just kind of take what you learned from last year and just apply that regardless of the almost 8,000 teams added in this format?
This time, this approach, we started drafting in June, a little bit sooner than before. And one of your guests, I believe, I'm not sure who it was, but he says that he doesn't even draft after June because you get so much value on the ADP when you're drafting in June and early July. And I kind of follow that philosophy. I'm going to, of course, draft probably a few more in August, September time frame, but the bulk of it is going to be there. And when I do start out, it's pretty much what best position, best player at the position when it starts off round 1, round 2. And then you're going to follow the format. Are you going robust running back, robust wide receiver, quarterback, tight end? And then later on, when you start having so many teams, then myself, we have a binder and a book with all our teams on there. So
old school.
Love school. It. So we'll flip to it and be like, okay, we took, say we took Cup this one. Okay, well, last time we took Cup, we paired him with Devontae Smith. We don't want to go that same route. So we'll switch it up. And we're not going to switch it up too crazy, but, if you have 2 players that are similar around the same ADP, might as well just go up there and just go ahead and grab it. And that's pretty much the approach that we take. Like you said, it's old school, looking at a binder, especially when it's
the way to go.
Remy, you are not alone. I mean, there are so many people that still old school it and are used to it and they're comfortable with it. And you got to do whatever is good for you. So I like it. And obviously, it worked out for you last year. And if you continue with the ratio you had in 2022 as far as league championships, man, 2023 is gonna be a good year for you guys.
I'm liking all the builds that we're getting. this build I really like because I was able to get Trevor Lawrence with Kirk. At that spot, I actually wasn't thinking about taking Kirk, but I knew I was going to get Trevor Lawrence. I was actually going to take McLaurin, but I'm real big on Christian Kirk. I think he's going to be phenomenal this year. I'm not really worried about Ridley. If anything, it takes pressure off Kirk, so that way he can go ahead and do what he did last year and improve on it. And Travis Etienne, he's a pass catching running back, so that's a good pair up as also.
Leads me right into my next question for you, because coming off the heels of this ETN, Kirk, Lawrence, and then even if you want to include Tank Bigsby stack, what are your thoughts on stacking this format? Are you a proponent, or is it just kind of go draft by draft and how the draft board falls to you?
And Remy, I should bring up too, like, I don't know exactly, or Aiden and I don't know exactly how your stacking has gone in your other Fantasy Pros drafts as well. So expand it to include all of them that you've done so
far. Let's see. We'll have to look at the book here. Stacking. So on the front part, Jamar Chase, anytime that we have Burrow there, that he falls into the 4th, 5th spot, we're taking him. I have a ton of Justin Herbert stacks. I love Quentin Johnson. He's my favorite. Second, I have another favorite rookie on there, Tank Dell. A lot of people, they got their question marks on him, but I like him. So Herbert with Quentin Johnson, Lamar Jackson with Andrews. We don't have many Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, or Patrick Mahomes stacks because the draft capital at the quarterbacks is it's a little bit too high. And in the drafts that I've been in, those 3 quarterbacks have been going late second, sometimes early second round. So we've been kind of shying away from him. We did a Justin Fields with Cole Kmet and DJ Moore. So we're pretty much all over the place when it comes to stacks. But we don't chase the stacks. I'll be honest with that. We don't chase it. So if the stack comes to us, of course, we're going to take it. And the reason that we don't chase it is because this isn't best ball.
Right.
But we do have to remember that later on, we do go into the best ball mode. So if there are stacks there, we will go after it.
We're talking with Remy LeBeau, who is drafting from the 11th spot tonight, ladies and gentlemen, in the Fantasy Pros Championship. Remy LeBeau and his co-manager. Give us a shout out on the co-manager again, Remy.
Jake.
They are going for a $1 million grand prize in the Fantasy Pros Championship this year. First time the FFPC and Fantasy Pros have ever done it. Let's talk about the draft that you just got out of. And I want to ask you specifically about George Kittle. This is something I always talk with anybody who drafts an elite tight end early. How important is it for you? Was the fact that you were at the end of the first round that give you thoughts on like, okay, maybe I can snag somebody here at the end of the 3rd, early 4th? Because you got Kittle at the 402 tonight as the tight end 4. How important is tight end for you, getting an elite tight end specifically in this contest?
If you look at all the championships in the FFPC, if you go through the database, all the top 1 through 5 championships, that's last year, the year before that. There's 2 variances when the St. Louis Tyler Bigbie and Dalton Schultz. Other than those 2, everybody that's won has taken a tight end in the top 5 capital. It's always there, whether it's Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard. It's a theme there. So when you see these, correlations, you kind of want to, not buck the trend, especially when you're going after this $1 million prize. So you want to put yourself in the best position that you can. So when Kittle came up, he's one of the highest ones on my draft board. Kittle is a rookie's quarterback's best friend. I know there's concerns. Maybe he's not going to pass around to Deebo Samuel, but if you go back and look at his stats for what he did, Kittle just blew up in the last 5 games. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 game, 1 touchdown, another 2 touchdown game, another 1 touchdown game. So you have to take that into account when you're looking at I'm sorry, George Kittle. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, and Aiden kind of alluded to this earlier, but when you look at what your team, what you had on the board, when you got to that 5-6 turn, so you get Kirk and Lawrence, right? So you get your Jacksonville stack there to go with Travis Etienne. Now you're looking at having 3 receivers. You have your stud top, what would it be? Top 13 running back there. You have your top 4 tight end. You have your quarterback. There's a lot to play around with. How excited were you and Jake to see when it rolled back to you at the end of the 7th that not only could you get James Conner there, but to get Javonte Williams at the 802, the way that your team was structured? How excited were you? Because I was thrilled for you guys. I thought that was fantastic, the way that your team was building.
If my mic was on and my camera was on, we would have been one of those, screaming type moments. I'll tell you that much right now. I'm not even going to lie. I was shocked. We were both shocked that James Conner, Javonte Williams. When we were going with the pick, we were going to go with Javonte Williams first, but I was afraid that they were going to look at ADP. So I said, all right, let's take Conner, because if they're looking at ADP, they're going to take Montgomery next, and then a wide receiver, and leave us Javonte. And I'm not really sure why Javonte is dropping, especially if Breece Hall is going in the 2nd round. I really don't understand that. Breece Hall has a worse injury than Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams already produced his first year. He got hurt in his 2nd year. Breece Hall was a rookie, and he got hurt 7 games in. So the jury is still out on him, and we don't know if he's going to be. And with those type of injuries, when the running back does come back, they're not up to speed to at least the 7th or 8th week. So for me, Javonte Williams is a steal at the 8th. I'm surprised he isn't going a little bit higher, at least the 6th or the 5th. So I'm going to take that draft capital every time. So we got lucky. I'm going to be honest. We got really extremely lucky being able to get Conner and Williams and filling out that backfield.
Yeah, and it's one thing to get Conner and Williams when you have good running backs on your team already. You just had Etienne, so you were loaded up at receiver. You had your elite tight end and quarterback. So I think, that is fantastic for how the draft fell to you in the first 8 rounds tonight. I want to shift the focus very briefly to your background here tonight, Remy, and this is something I think we talked about before. But Biplab Mandel was in this draft. John Terry, I know you've competed against him in a lot of drafts in the Fantasy Pros Championship. They want to know your background. Aiden says it's comic books. What comic books are hanging on the wall behind you tonight, my friend?
You got the first appearance of Century, first appearance of Remy LeBeau, Gambit. You got the first appearance of Sandman. Let's see, who else?
First
go ahead. You can look. That's
first
fine.
appearance of Venom, Frank Miller. That's a collection right there.
First appearance of Spawn.
Spawn. That's another good one too.
Todd McFarlane.
Yeah,
you can't really see everything up there. I mean, I got a whole wall full. I'm not going to lie to you. First appearance, the Blue Beetle was coming out. I've had that for a while now. The first appearance of him. First appearance of Ghost Rider, Punisher.
I'm thinking of the movie counterparts for all this. I'm like, oh, Blue Beetle, that's the one with George Lopez that's coming up. Oh, Ghost Rider, Nicolas Cage. Oh, Gambit, you have Taylor Kitsch. Oh, I'm thinking about the movie counterpart for all these as well. I never grew up on comic books, but I love the comic book superhero movies that keep coming out. And it's so tell the listeners, or the viewers, they probably want to know, is your name literally Remy LeBeau, or is this an alias that you go by?
It's an alias that I've had for at least 20 years.
Okay,
so
all
it's
right,
not
perfect.
something new.
You don't throw like playing cards that turn into like fire or anything like that, right?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
I've been working on it the last 20 years. Maybe I'll get the hang of it once in a while. Like,
hey man, $1 million grand prize. That'll help you with your development for sure. Talent development for Remy LeBeau, being able to become a real life X-Men. Remy, I don't know if I told you this. I'm a Midwest guy like you. but I'm in Wisconsin. I'm like basically 2 Hail Marys southwest of Lambeau Field, 2 Jordan Love Hail Marys southwest of Lambeau Field. So I don't cover the Packers, but I follow them. I'm a fan. And I got to ask you, you drafted a couple of them here tonight. Yes. Romeo Doubs in the 9th round. You get Jordan Love late. I'm kind of curious if you are drinking the Doubs Kool-Aid, because there's a lot of beat writers up here that think Doubs is going to be the most targeted receiver in Green Bay this year. He's going to have more catches than Christian Watson and any other Packers receiver. And I happen to be pretty bullish on Jordan Love. He is not, to me, going to be Brett Favre. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, even at the peak of his powers. I do think he makes a couple of Pro Bowl teams, and I do think that he has a couple of top 10 quarterback seasons in him. And I kind of like him for this year as well. Your thoughts on the Doubs and Love picks tonight?
Well, full disclosure, I am a Detroit fan because I am from Detroit. So like you, I know Green Bay very well. So taking Jordan Love and Doubs, being a Detroit fan, tells you how high I am on them, to let you know. Jordan Love, if you look at his SOS, he has, I think, the best quarterback SOS along with his wide receivers. And I think that's getting overlooked. And not only that, I think his the running back SOS is even the same. It's one of the easiest. So you have a running quarterback who's going to get off to a hot start, probably, because he's going to have an easy schedule. And then you throw in Romeo Doubs, who's where did I take Romeo Doubs?
9th round, 9-11.
I mean, and where is Christian going?
Christian Watson went tonight at the 410.
That's way too big of a ADP discrepancy right there. There's no way that Romeo Doubs shouldn't be going in the same vicinity as Christian Watson. Let's face it. I mean, Doubs is no slouch either. Christian Watson, yeah, he had a very good connection with Aaron Rodgers, but what's the connection going to be with Jordan Love? So when you're able to connect Doubs with Jordan Love, I think it's just a fantastic combo, and I'm with you on that. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, are you really big on Romeo Doubs and the Jordan Love, or are you more on the Christian Watson?
Yeah, what's funny is, like, I always thought I was more on Doubs, and yet I'm in the Scott Fish Bowl right now, and Watson was the second receiver I drafted. So maybe I am more on the Watson. I do like Love quite a bit. I want to be perfectly clear. He is not going to set the world on fire this year, but I do think he plays really well. I do think he is a fringe top 15 quarterback at the end of the season, which makes his ADP very worthwhile for Jordan Love this year. I think he's going to be very good. I think that what's more exciting to me is what he does in 2024 when Watson and Doubs both have 2 years of experience under their belt, and Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, and Jaden Reed aren't rookies anymore. Like, I think that's going to be more compelling. You have the Packers running backs. I don't want to turn this into a Packers show, but I think I am. You have the Packers running backs. Aaron Jones is a $17.7 million cap hit for 2024. A.J. Dillon is going to be a free agent. This could be 2024 could be the year of Jordan Love. He can lean on the run game this year, but I think the running backs are going to be there's going to be a lot of change in the Packers backfield next year. So while I think 2023 could be good for Jordan Love and the Packers offense, man, I think 2024 could be great. Not elite, but I think it could be great. I'm bullish on the Packers, and I feel like I'm coming from as much of an unbiased standpoint as I can, but I'm with you. I think there's no way that Christian Watson should be going 5 rounds ahead of Romeo Doubs, and I don't think Jordan Love should be the 19th quarterback off the board in the 18th round. That should not happen either. So I like both those picks.
There's
go ahead.
The other quarterback that I don't think it even got drafted, which was Russell Wilson didn't even get drafted.
Russell Wilson did not get drafted tonight. I believe that is accurate, and that to me is a mistake. Now, I like Love, but I would have taken Wilson over Love.
And believe it or not, that's what the discussion that we were going to have. But the problem with that is they have the same bye week. Trevor
and
Lawrence.
I don't know what your ownership is like on Wilson either. You know what I mean?
Wilson, when I punt quarterback, I do take Wilson because you can get him cheap, but I've never seen him go undrafted in here, and I'm not sure why? I mean, the guy has one bad year. He gets a new coaching system, everything over there. You got Sutton, you got Javonte Williams. I mean, you got Jerry Jeudy,
Greg
I mean,
Dulcich, Tim
where's
Patrick.
Jerry Jeudy going?
Judy went tonight in the 4th round, didn't he, Aiden? Yeah, 405. 405.
I mean,
tonight.
if you're that high on Jerry Jeudy, I mean, then why are you not going? How is Russell Wilson going undrafted?
Kurt Russell did not get selected tonight, even in an all Fast and Furious, Hateful Eight, Escape from New York draft. Kurt Russell did not.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Escape from Denver.
Exactly. From Denver. All right, so let's get into this before everybody tunes out, because I've been talking Packers this whole time. You look at your draft here after round 9. You drafted a lot of late round running backs. You mentioned a lot of them tonight. Tank Bigsby, Tyjae Spears, Zamir White, Israel Abanikanda, Keontae Ingram, Zach Evans. Do you have a favorite late round running back among those players?
I love them all. I'm not going to lie. I can make a case for all of them. Zach Evans, I think, is going to end up being the starting running back because they just don't like Cam Akers. They don't like him. They tried to get rid of him already twice, and he's still hanging around there. It's one of those situations with Josh Jacobs. I mean, Josh Jacobs, they weren't even close in a contract just because they were shopping him last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't believe they even care if he signs the tender or not because they have Zamir White. And I think that's what he's going to go. I mean, maybe he signs it, maybe he doesn't. But I think that's a good value pick. Like I said, Tyjae Spears, Henry has got over, I think he's 370 touches again. Every second time he's done that. First time he did it, he got hurt. So that's a good value there. Like I already touched on, Hall, Breece Hall, we don't know if he's going to. And before the draft started, Israel was already up there on people's radars of being so great if he went to the right spot. So, taking him if something happens to Breece Hall, and even if he isn't 100%, they're going to mix him in there. And they don't like Michael Carter. They don't.
I want to point out Rich Bilyeu, who is the team we were just talking about, Remy. They took Joe Burrow in the 5th round, which is a full round later than his ADP, and that's why they did not go with Russell Wilson. He said, listen, if you want, we could take Russell Wilson on waivers if we actually need to grab him. Better take Mason. Could be running back 2 at San Francisco. Shh, don't tell anybody about Jordan Mason. Okay, so there we go. On the 49ers running back tip. I'm going to turn this over, Remy, to Aiden in a second. The last thing I want to touch on is Odell Beckham tonight. You grabbed him as wide receiver 54 at the 1202 as your number 5 wide receiver. It's hard to make sense of the Ravens wide receivers this year. Can you give us your take on why you guys, and again, at this point, Flowers and Bateman were off the board. Can you give us your thoughts on why Beckham was your pick in the 12th round?
Odell Beckham has the high upside. He does. He is still a quality player. He's been out for 2 years. But you know what? His ADP is going to start going up when you start seeing him taking these one-handed grabs, in training camp and showing, his usual style of, what he brings to the table. And getting him in the 12th round, he's going to be able to stretch the field, and Lamar Jackson is going to look for him, and he's got to throw it to somebody other than Mark Andrews. And that's the philosophy about it. When you get down there, you're trying to take some upside on people. We had a debate between Odell and Lazard, and there's Mooney, there's Mingo that I passed up on. Those are still all great players. You have Rashee Rice, the rookie, but you have Tony there. Everybody's hyped up on Tony. In that spot, I don't think that you can really go wrong. I just kind of went with the veteran upside there and see what happens. And if you look at it, I already have A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, Kirk. and Dobbs. And then I was hoping to get Quentin Johnson, didn't get him, but I did get Tank Dell, and I'm really high into Tank Dell. When the team comes to the quarterback and asks which wide receiver that you want, and they go out and get him, I'm assuming that he's going to be on the field, and they have a connection there and they're friends.
My question for you was going to be about Jahmyr White, but you really kind of touched on it a lot when your discussion late running back. So I'm going to pivot to you win the $1 million grand prize. What's the first comic book that you're going to?
Ooh, that is special. This is good.
What's the white whale?
The white whale would be the highest graded that I can get. Maybe 7.5 or 8.0 of the first appearance of Barry Allen. Flash. That would be.
I just had. Who was this that I had on? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't somebody. Maybe it's blurring together. Was I doing a show or was I talking to somebody in real life about this? But they said their favorite all-time comic book character was Barry Allen. Now, I don't know. Like, Remy, how does your comic book love? Does that feed into the cinema? Like, are you watching the movies of the the recent movies of these superheroes? Or are you staying away?
Oh no, I hate all the comic book movies. No, I'm just joking.
I'll tell you this: I had high hopes for Flash. I saw it and I was kind of like,
it was rough.
Eh.
They touched on Flashpoint, which is a big part of it and stuff. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody, but Michael Keaton, seeing him put on, the bat suit again,
right?
It really made the Flash. That whole part with him in there. I'm in agreement with you. They could have probably did a little bit better. I was hoping for a little bit more. The storyline was good, but you throw in Michael Keaton as the original Batman over there, the best Batman. I mean, you can't go wrong with it.
And I won't ruin it for anybody, but the big cameo at the end of the movie, that was tremendous as well. I'll say this about the Michael Keaton thing, and I know we got to wrap things up here, but I'll make this quick. I did not like the way they introduced the Michael Keaton Batman into the Flash, because he had the long hair, he had the beard. Unless you were like hardcore and you knew it was happening, like you kind of missed it, right? Like, they should have just made him appear like how they made that last Batman appear. That is how I wanted to see Michael Keaton appear.
Well, I was waiting for him to pull out the White Russian drink, because he's coming off as the Big Lebowski vibe over there.
Yeah.
So
oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah, that it would have pulled it all together.
And literally, he could have said, "Oh yeah, don't," because they had the fight in the kitchen. And he could have said, with his long hair and his beard, he's like, "Oh, don't mess up the rug, man. It ties the whole room together." And that is a Big Lebowski reference.
Beautiful.
They struggled. It's tough coming out with that, the visual side of it, the animation. They're coming out after Across the Spider-Verse. You're not winning that battle if you're the.
And I'll tell you this: I just watched Across the Spider-Verse the other day. I thought it was okay at best. I love the Into the Spider-Verse. Across, I don't know. We got to drop back, guys. I'm sorry. We could go off on this.
We do. I have one more question.
Aiden, go ahead. Yes.
As with the high stakes fantasy football hours, we talked about comic books and comic movies for last time. Last question for you. It's a two-parter, but what's kind of bulky? I know you always do this too. What's the one player that you're fading the most in all your drafts, and then the one player that you're targeting the most or the highest on?
Let's see. I'm fading the most Josh Jacobs. And that was before he didn't sign his tender. I'm just not a big, like I said, that whole situation I think is bad. And they ran him into the ground. I think he's got over 380 touches over there. So, like I said, I like Breece Hall. Now, if Breece Hall fell to like the 4th, maybe 5th, then I would take him. But I think that anybody else, you think? No. There's two players that I have way too much of him, but he keeps falling in the third. At this time, he went at the front of the third, which is Najee Harris. Najee Harris, I love. I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. I have him at least 40% of my teams. And Tank Dell has got to be probably in every one of my drafts because you can get him just so late. And I'm really big on him, and I know some people they touch up on his height because he's only 5'8", and for those people, I mean, would you take Julio Jones or Calvin Johnson, Megatron?
Calvin Johnson.
Calvin Johnson?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay. Now, Julio Jones is 6'3", Calvin Johnson is 6'5". There's only a 2-inch variance there. So here are some of the players that are 5'8" to 5'10". That's going in this draft. Deontay Johnson, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Tyler Lockett. The entire Arizona team is 5'10" or below with Marquise Brown. I mean, so when people start talking about a height, I mean, that means you would have never took Antonio Brown, who's
and Rich, just sorry to interrupt you, but I think Remy, sorry to interrupt you. I think this is a good point that you bring up, because when Calvin Johnson and Julio Jones were running fantasy drafts, like, it was a different kind of NFL. I think within the last 4 or 5 years, we over-evaluate height, right? Because like now you can see all these diminutive, undersized receivers put up massive fantasy numbers. And I think we as fantasy owners, as we just exhibited, are a little bit hesitant to draft the shorter guy, even though that's the way the NFL seems to be proceeding.
Yeah, and like I said, Antonio Brown, 2013 to 2017, was the number 1 fantasy wide receiver in PPR. I think, 4 years in a row, he was number 1. The 5th year, he came in 5th place, and that's because he didn't play the 17th game, and he was only 10 points behind. I think it was maybe DeAndre Hopkins that year. And, I mean, now people also need to know that, Steve Smith, another great wide receiver, was only 5'9". Barry Sanders was 5'8". Emmitt Smith was 5'9". Maurice Jones-Drew was 5'8". I mean, these are all players that are around that same height. So I wouldn't get caught up on height. I would just get caught up on skill and what the people, what they're able to do with their ability.
Remy, I would say good luck to you this season. I have a feeling, I know that this is not your last draft. So I will say this: good luck, and see you in your next Fantasy Pros draft. And thank you so much for hopping aboard after a long, stressful night of drafting what could be the $1 million team. We appreciate you making some time for us tonight, man.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. See you guys around.
Remy LeBeau, ladies and gentlemen, drafting from the 11th spot tonight. Congratulations to him on a very good draft, as Aiden and I already talked about, and we will see him again shortly in the Fantasy Pros Championship. All right, so I want to thank Remy LeBeau, Aiden LaCorey, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you. We will be back at 10/9 Central this Friday on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with a traditional show. No, I don't believe we're doing live draft coverage that night. That could change. We'll see what happens. However, Aiden, tomorrow, you have a big night planned right here on the FFPC YouTube channel.
Yep, basketball tournament draft coverage this Wednesday. I believe it's 7:30. Sign up. Spots are still available. League 55576 at myffpc.com. Myself, I'll be hosting. Dave Terpoli and Theo Greminger of the GOAT District and Roto Underworld / Player Profiler will be drafting live in the contest. So we'll be following their live draft.
And it's going to be exciting. That starts at 7:30 Eastern, right? 7:30 Eastern, I believe.
Yes,
okay.
Sir.
All right. So make sure you're signing up for that and have your draft covered live on the FFPC social media channels. You can actually also watch this previous Thursday's High Stakes Fantasy Football show on the Better Sports Network socials, as well as the FFPC socials. The GOAT District's John Daniel joined me. It was a lot of fun, 2 hours of fun, frivolity, and I learned a lot as well. So check that out. And then this Thursday at 7/6 Central, I'm going to have Fantasy Pros Andrew Erickson on to talk about everything that's going on in the Fantasy Pros Championship, his thoughts on how to draft a dominant team and more. Win a $1 million grand prize, not only with the FFPC main event, but the Fantasy Pros Championship at myffpc.com. And, of course, Dynasty Leagues. Over 1,400 Dynasty Leagues going on at the FFPC. Not a single one has ever folded. Sign up now, myffpc.com. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and get notified. Your week of fantasy football drafting continues now. Aiden, we'll be watching you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with much more fantasy goodness. Thanks for watching, everybody.